Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Nika Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What if Deku had LITRPG gaming quirk? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. You dare call yourself a Midoriya? The voice boomed across the dining room, vibrating in the fine china set on the table. It was a daily ritual, a prayer of hatred recited by Hisashi Midoriya. Izuku sat at the far end of the table, his head bowed low. He stared at his plate, a mismatch of leftovers, while the others enjoyed fresh katsudon. He was 6 years old, but his eyes held the hollow, haunted look of an old man waiting for the end. "I'm sorry, father," Izuku whispered, the words automatic. He didn't know what he was apologizing for this time. Breathing too loud? Existing in the same room? Being quirkless? "Don't call me that," Hisashi spat. He stood up, his hand glowing with the heat of his fire-breathing quirk, not enough to burn the house down, but enough to blister skin. "I don't consider a quirkless defect, my son." Izuku flinched as the heat wave washed over him. He looked to his mother, Inko. She was obsessively arranging her napkin, refusing to make eye contact. She cared more about her public image as the wife of a powerful hero than the child shivering at the end of her table. Across from him sat his siblings. Yuki, the youngest girl, and his two older brothers, Kenzo and Daiki. They were smiling. It wasn't a happy smile, it was the cruel, expectant grin of an audience waiting for the show to start. They were strong. They had quirks. They were Midoriya. "He's trembling," Kenzo laughed, creating a small spark of lightning between his fingers. "Look at him. He's pathetic." "Maybe if we scare him enough, a quirk will pop out," Daiki sneered. "Or maybe he'll just disappear," Yuki added, her voice innocent but her eyes cold. The laughter that followed cut deeper than any physical blow. Izuku felt something inside him, a taut, fraying wire, begin to vibrate. He had endured this for 3 years. 3 years of being the punching bag. 3 years of being the stain on a perfect family portrait. Hisashi walked over, grabbing Izuku by the collar of his shirt. He lifted the boy effortlessly, the heat radiating from his hand singing the fabric. "You are a stain on this family," Hisashi growled, his face inches from Izuku's. "Every time the cameras flash, I worry they'll see you in the background. You make us look weak." "I hate you," Izuku thought. The thought was so loud it drowned out the ringing in his ears. Hisashi raised a hand, wreathed in flame. "I want you to stop. I want you to hurt." Hisashi's hand came down. The impact sent Izuku sprawling across the hardwood floor. He tasted copper. Blood. "I want you dead." The world seemed to pause. The sound of his siblings laughing sounded distorted, like audio played underwater. The pain in his cheek throbbed, but it felt distant. In the center of Izuku's vision, a translucent blue window appeared. It didn't look like a quirk. It looked like a command prompt. Condition met, absolute hatred. Condition met, desire for death. System initializing. Izuku blinked, thinking it was a concussion. But the text remained, glowing softly in the dim light of the dining room. "Welcome, player. Class selection, automatic. Class, Reaper assigned. Quest generated, the first harvest. Objective, sever the ties that bind. Get up!" Hisashi roared, stepping forward for another kick. Izuku looked up. He didn't see his father anymore. He saw a red bar floating above the man's head. It was a health bar. And for the first time in his life, Izuku realized that the invincible hero Hisashi Midoriya was just a collection of numbers. And numbers could be reduced to 0. Izuku stood up. He didn't tremble. The fear that had defined his existence for 3 years evaporated, replaced by a cold, numbing void. "What's with that look?" Kenzo stopped laughing. "Dad, look at his eyes." Hisashi sneered. "Rebellious phase? I'll beat it out of." Izuku raised his hand. He didn't know what he was doing, but the system guided him. It felt like remembering a skill he had practiced 1,000 times in a past life. Skill activated, Reaper's Touch, LVL1. A shadowy, ethereal substance leaked from Izuku's small hand. It coalesced, forming a jagged, spectral blade that extended from his forearm. Hisashi froze, his eyes widening. "A quirk? You have a quirk?" "No," Izuku said. His voice was flat, devoid of the childish pitch it usually held. "This isn't a quirk." He swung. It wasn't a graceful strike. It was a clumsy, desperate slash. But the spectral blade ignored the durability of Hisashi's skin. It passed through his neck with 0 resistance, like smoke passing through water. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the red bar above Hisashi's head vanished. Hisashi Midoriya, the pro-hero, the tyrant of the household, collapsed. There was no blood spray, no dramatic wound. His soul had simply been severed from his body. "Hisashi!" Inko screamed, finally looking up from her napkin. Izuku turned to his mother. The woman who watched. The woman who ignored him. Objective update, 1-2 targets eliminated. Inko scrambled back, her telekinesis flaring in panic, throwing chairs and plates at him. A heavy porcelain dish smashed into Izuku's shoulder, but he didn't feel it. The adrenaline and the strange, cold energy of the system numbed everything. He walked through the debris. Stay back! Inko shrieked. You monster! Stay back! Monster! Izuku tested the word. It felt right. Yes. He reached out. Inko tried to push him back with her quirk, but the shadow energy around Izuku seemed to eat her telekinetic hold. He touched her chest. Skill activated, Reaper's Touch. Inko gasped, her eyes rolling back, and she slumped over the table, face landing in her pristine dinner. Silence descended on the room. Izuku stood there, his chest heaving. A strange sensation washed over him. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't horror. It was relief. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being lifted off his chest. He felt good. Quest complete, the first harvest. Level up. Level up. Level up. He turned slowly to the side. Huddled in the corner of the room were Yuki, Kenzo, and Daiki. They were clutching each other, their faces pale, eyes wide with absolute terror. They stared at the bodies of their parents, then at the small, bloodless boy standing over them. Izuku raised his hand again. The shadows flickered. Yuki let out a high-pitched, broken sob. Izuku paused. He looked at the red bars above their heads. They were low. So low. He could end it all right here. He could wipe the slate clean. But as he looked at Yuki's terrified face, a memory surfaced. A memory of playing with her in the park. Before the diagnosis. Before the hell started. The shadow blade dissipated. Don't, Izuku whispered. It was a warning. A command. A goodbye. He turned and walked out the front door, leaving the door wide open to the cold night air, leaving his siblings alone with the corpses of the parents they had worshipped. The rain was freezing. Izuku had been walking for hours. Or maybe days. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by a gnawing hunger and a bone-deep chill. He was curled up in an alleyway, shivering under a damp cardboard box. The euphoria of the kill was gone. Now, there was only the crushing reality. He was 6. He was alone. He was a murderer. People walked past the alleyway, ignoring the bundle of rags that was a child. Heroes patrolled the skies, flashing their smiles for the cameras, oblivious to the darkness rotting in the alley below. I'm going to die here, Izuku mumbled, his teeth chattering. HP, 1550 status, hypothermia, mild, starvation. The blue box mocked him. It gave him information, but no food. No warmth. Hello there, little one. The voice was smooth, deep, and carried a strange resonance. Izuku flinched, trying to push himself deeper into the corner. He looked up. A man stood at the mouth of the alley. He was tall, wearing a pristine suit that seemed to repel the rain. He held a black umbrella, shielding himself from the downpour. Go away, Izuku croaked. The man didn't leave. He stepped closer, the heels of his shoes clicking on the wet pavement. He crouched down, extending the umbrella so it covered Izuku, shielding him from the freezing rain. You have the eyes of someone who has seen the abyss, the man said softly. He smiled, but it wasn't the fake smile of a hero. It was a smile that promised power. And I believe the abyss blinked first. Who? Who are you? A friend to the castaways, the man said. He extended a large hand. My name is All for One. And I believe you and I have much to discuss, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku stared at the hand. He knew he shouldn't trust strangers. He knew this man felt dangerous. The system was flashing a red warning sign in the corner of his vision. Warning, high-level entity detected. Level? But Izuku looked at the warnings, then at the cold, wet street behind him. He looked at the hand offering him warmth. He reached out and took it. I have nowhere to go, Izuku whispered. All for One's grin widened. On the contrary, young Izuku. You have everywhere to go. As the man helped him up, a final notification chimed in Izuku's mind, unseen by the villain. System linked. Welcome to the game. The smell of antiseptic was sharp enough to burn Izuku's nose. He sat on a cold metal examination table, swinging his legs back and forth. He had been here for 3 days. Or maybe 4. Time was difficult to track in the doctor's lab, where the lights buzzed with an incessant, headache-inducing hum. Fascinating, Dr. Shigaraki muttered, adjusting his thick, circular goggles. He tapped a screen displaying Izuku's X-rays. Truly fascinating. All for One sat in a leather chair in the corner of the room, looking effortlessly regal amidst the gore and machinery of the lab. What is the verdict, Doctor? Biologically? He is quirkless, Shigaraki wheezed, spinning around on his stool. He has the extra toe joint. His brain lacks the necessary quirk factor zones. By all known laws of genetics, he should be as powerless as a quirkless rat. The doctor leaned in close to Izuku, his breath smelling of chemicals. And yet, when I try to run a deep scan on his neural pathways, my equipment malfunctions. It's as if something is blocking me. Something foreign. Izuku stared blankly at the wall. Above the doctor's head, a blue box floated. NPC, Dr. Shigaraki, LVL-25, status, mad scientist threat level, low, physically, high, intellectually. The boy claims he can see menus, All for One said, amused. He calls it a system. Delusions caused by trauma? Shigaraki suggested. Perhaps, All for One stood up. Or perhaps evolution has taken a path we did not anticipate. Izuku, you said you unlocked a new ability this morning? Izuku nodded slowly. Since the night in the alley, the blue boxes had been his only comfort. They didn't yell. They didn't hit him. They just gave him orders and rewards. It was simple. Show us, All for One commanded. Izuku hopped off the table. He didn't need to concentrate hard. The skill was etched into his mind, itching to be used. Dungeon create, Izuku whispered. The air in the lab didn't change, but Izuku's vision warped. The sterile white tiles of the lab dissolved, replaced by cracked asphalt. The buzzing of the lights was replaced by the sound of wind howling through broken windows. Instance created, F-rank dungeon, the rotting city time dilation, 1 hour, real, 1 day, dungeon, clear condition, slay the boss. Izuku blinked. He was no longer in the lab. He was standing in the middle of a ruined intersection. Skyscrapers, stripped of their glass and steel, loomed over him like skeletal fingers. The sky was a bruised purple color, devoid of a sun. Master? Izuku called out. No answer. The skill description had said it created a personal instance. He was alone. A low groan echoed from the alleyway to his left. Izuku turned. Shuffling out of the shadows was a creature that looked like a man, but the skin was gray and sloughing off the bone. One of its eyes was missing, replaced by a maggot-infested socket. Enemy, Rotting Walker, LVL-3. Fear, cold and sharp, spiked in Izuku's chest. This wasn't a game. The smell of rotting meat was GG-inducing. The zombie lunged. Izuku scrambled back, tripping over a piece of rubble. The zombie fell on top of him, snapping its yellow teeth inches from his nose. Its drool black and viscous dripped onto Izuku's cheek. Get off! Izuku screamed. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have training. He just had the panic of a 6-year-old child. He shoved his hand against the zombie's chest. Skill, Reaper's Touch. The spectral blade flared to life, but unlike with his father, it didn't slice cleanly. It required mana, and Izuku was low. The shadowy energy flickered, barely cutting into the zombie's dead flesh. Mana, 550 warning, low mana. The zombie bit down. Izuku shrieked as teeth tore into his forearm. Pain, white-hot and blinding, shot up his arm. HP, 4250. He kicked out, connecting with the zombie's knee. There was a sickening crack, and the creature toppled to the side. Izuku scrambled to his feet, clutching his bleeding arm. It hurts, he whimpered. It hurts, it hurts. He wanted to go home. He wanted his mom. But his mom was dead. He killed her. Kill or be killed. The thought wasn't his. It felt like the system whispering in his ear. Izuku looked around. A rusted metal pipe lay near a pile of trash. He grabbed it. It was heavy in his small hands. The zombie was crawling toward him, dragging its broken leg. Izuku gritted his teeth. He raised the pipe. Smash. Critical hit. He hit it again. And again. And again. Long after the creature stopped moving, long after the red bar above its head vanished, Izuku kept swinging. He swung until his arms burned and the pipe was slick with black ichor. You have slain a rotting walker. EXP gained, 15. Izuku dropped the pipe, his chest heaving. He waited for the horror to set in. He waited to cry. But then, a sound chimed. A beautiful, crystal-clear sound like a bell. Level up. All stats plus 1 HP restored. The pain in his arm vanished. Izuku looked down. The bite mark was gone. The exhaustion was gone. He felt stronger, faster, better. A smile crept onto his face. It was a small, broken thing. More, he whispered. Izuku spent 3 days in the dungeon. Or, 3 hours in the real world. He learned quickly. The zombies were slow, but strong. If he made noise, they swarmed. If he stayed quiet, he could pick them off one by one. He learned that Reaper's Touch was a finishing move, not an opening attack. He learned that headshots dealt double damage. By the time he found the boss room, a collapsed subway station, he was level. He was covered in grime, his clothes were torn, but his eyes were sharp. Boss, Zombie King, LVL-10. The king was massive, easily 7 feet tall, wearing the tattered remains of a riot police uniform. It held a concrete block in one hand like a baseball bat. Izuku didn't charge in. He was a child fighting a monster. He had to be smart. He stood at the top of the subway escalators and banged his pipe against the railing. "Hey! Ugly!" The Zombie King roared and charged up the stairs. Izuku waited. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Wait for it. Wait for it. When the king was 5 steps away, Izuku triggered the trap he had spent the last hour setting up. He kicked a vending machine he had precariously balanced at the top of the stairs. Gravity did the rest. The heavy machine tumbled down, crashing into the king's legs. The monster roared as it lost its footing, tumbling backward down the sharp metal steps of the escalator. Crash. Crash. Snap. The king landed at the bottom in a heap. Boss HP, 35%. Now, Izuku hissed. He jumped. He didn't aim for the body. He aimed for the neck. Skill, Reaper's Touch. He poured every ounce of his remaining mana into the strike. The shadow blade extended, longer and sharper than before. He drove it down like a guillotine. The king's head separated from its shoulders. Boss defeated. Level up. Level up. Reward, class skill unlocked, summon servant. Reward, inventory unlocked. The world dissolved around him. The purple sky shattered like glass. Izuku fell to his knees, vomiting bile onto the sterile white floor of Dr. Garaki's lab. 3 hours, all for one noted, checking a pocket watch. He looked down at the boy, who was covered in phantom gore that was slowly fading away as the instance closed. Impressive. Izuku wiped his mouth. He looked up at the villain. His eyes were different now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hungry calculation. Did I do good? Izuku asked, his voice raspy. You did excellent, all for one smiled. Go clean yourself up, Izuku. Tomorrow, you meet your new family. I believe young Tamura is eager to meet his player too. Izuku sat on one of the bar stools, his legs barely touching the floor. The air in the hideout was stagnant, smelling faintly of alcohol and old dust. It was a sharp contrast to the sterile lab he had just left, and an even sharper contrast to the rotting city of his first dungeon. At the far end of the bar sat a boy. He looked a few years older than Izuku, with pale, scratchy skin and shaggy blue-gray hair. A disembodied hand covered his face. So, the boy rasped, his voice like sandpaper. You're the player 2 Sensei wouldn't shut up about. Izuku gripped the edge of his seat. Observe. Target, Tamura Shigaraki, Tenko Shimura, level, 56 stats. Hidden due to level gap, threat level, deadly. Izuku swallowed hard. Level he was currently level the gap wasn't just wide, it was insurmountable. If Shigaraki wanted him dead, Izuku would be dust before he could blink. I'm Izuku, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Shigaraki turned, a singular red eye visible between the fingers of the hand mask. I don't care. Sensei says you're important. I say you look like a glitch. A weak little NPC who unlocked a cheat code. Tamura, Kurojiri warned from behind the bar, polishing a glass. Master AFO wishes for you to get along. I'll get along when he proves he isn't useless, Shigaraki muttered, turning back to his handheld game. Don't die in the tutorial, kid. Izuku slid off the stool, his face burning. Weak. Glitch. NPC. The words dug into him. He hated that Shigaraki was right. I need to get stronger, Izuku whispered to himself as he retreated to the corner of the room. I need to level up. He opened his system menu. He had farmed the F-rank dungeon 5 times since arriving. Dungeon create, F-rank EXP gain, diminished, 10%. It's not enough, Izuku hissed. The F-ranks are giving me nothing now. His finger hovered over the difficulty slider. He moved it up. Warning, creating D-rank instance. Recommended level, 30 plus terrain, survival. I can't wait until level 30, Izuku said, the image of Shigaraki's level 56 looming in his mind. I have to catch up. Dungeon create. The bar dissolved. The cool air vanished, replaced instantly by a wall of dry, scorching heat. Izuku opened his eyes and gasped. He wasn't in a city. He was standing in an endless ocean of orange sand. The sun beat down on him like a physical weight. Instance, the Lost Desert, D-rank, quest, find the oasis. Time limit, 7 days. Environment penalty, dehydration rate x2. A desert. Izuku groaned, shielding his eyes. Seriously? He checked the shop. He bought 3 bottles of water, his points draining painfully fast. He started walking. The D-rank was a nightmare. In the F-rank, the zombies were slow. Here, the enemies were predators. On the second day, the ground beneath him exploded. A massive mouth lined with circular teeth erupted from the sand. Enemy, giant sandworm, LVL 32. Shadow step. Izuku screamed, vanishing into a puff of black smoke and reappearing 10 feet away. The worm slammed its jaws shut where he had been standing a second ago. He swung his scythe, the blade sparking against the worm's thick hide. It didn't even leave a scratch. Run, Izuku breathed. Just run. He spent 3 days running. He slept in short bursts, buried under the sand to hide from the cold desert night. He was exhausted, thirsty, and terrified. But he kept moving. He had to prove he wasn't just a glitch. On the 4th day, he saw it. Rising out of the dunes was a massive stone structure, reminiscent of an ancient Mayan temple. It wasn't an oasis, but it was the only thing breaking the horizon. Izuku climbed the weathered steps and dropped into the cool darkness of the interior. The walls were covered in faded murals depicting a war between a demon with a scythe and a hero wielding a sword of light. A tomb, Izuku realized, tracing the carving of the hero. This place is a grave. He descended deep into the earth until he reached a massive set of stone doors. Boss room ahead. Izuku didn't hesitate. He pushed the doors open. The chamber was vast, lit by spectral blue torches. In the center stood a sarcophagus, and guarding it was a figure wrapped in tattered, ancient bandages. He wore rusted armor that might have once been gold. Boss, Bahadur the fallen hero, LVL 40, status, cursed undead. The mummy turned. Its eyes glowed with blue fire. Intruder, a hollow voice echoed in the room. Move, Izuku said, summoning his scythe. Reaper's best friend. The mummy vanished. Wham! Izuku felt the impact before he saw the movement. A bandaged fist slammed into his gut, sending him flying across the room. He smashed into a stone pillar, coughing up blood. HP, 184-50 warning, critical damage. So fast, Izuku wheezed. He tried to stand, but bandages shot out from the mummy's arms like spears, piercing the stone floor inches from his head. Izuku rolled, dodging strike after strike. He was outmatched. This thing was level, he was barely level. The mummy grabbed him by the throat and lifted him up. Weak, the mummy hissed. I am not weak. Izuku choked out. He activated his trump card. The skill he had unlocked at level 15 but was too afraid to use because of the backlash. Grim. A massive shadow avatar erupted from Izuku's back, overlapping with his body. It was a specter of death itself. Skill activated, Grim, LVL1, effect, all stats plus 300% for 60 seconds. Backlash, severe pain. Power exploded in Izuku's veins. He broke the mummy's grip effortlessly. What? The mummy gasped. Izuku didn't answer. He moved faster than the eye could track. He appeared behind Bahadur, his scythe glowing with dark energy. Rest now, Izuku whispered. He swung. The boosted strength tore through the mummy's cursed defenses. The head flew from the shoulders, turning to ash before it hit the ground. Boss defeated. Level up. Level up. Level up. The shadow avatar faded, and Izuku collapsed, screaming as his nerves felt like they were on fire. The backlash was agonizing. But amidst the pain, a notification chime rang out. Quest complete. Reward, S-rank loot box. Reward, 10,000 points. Izuku lay on the cold stone floor, panting. He reached out with a trembling hand and opened the box in the menu. Item obtained, invitation description, allows the user to invite an entity from their most recent dungeon to the real world. Izuku stared at the card in his hand. He looked at the pile of ash where the hero had stood. The murals on the wall showed a noble warrior who died protecting his people. You called me weak, Izuku muttered. Maybe I need someone strong to teach me how to be strong. He held the card up. I invite Bahadur. Processing request. Entity found, Bahadur, deceased. Reconstructing. White light flooded the tomb. When Izuku opened his eyes, the smell of the tomb was gone. He was back on the floor of the bar. Kurojairi was still polishing the same glass. But sitting across from him, looking at his own hands in confusion, was a man. The bandages were gone. He had silver hair and piercing blue eyes. He was alive. The man looked up, locking eyes with Izuku. Where? Bahadur's voice was hoarse. I died. I remember dying. Izuku grinned, blood still staining his teeth. I brought you back. Welcome to the team. The silence in the bar was heavy, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the clicking of Tamura Shigaraki's handheld game. Bahadur, the fallen hero, sat on the dirty floorboards. He blinked, his blue eyes adjusting to the dim light. He looked at his hands, flesh, not bone. He touched his face, skin, not bandages. Alive? Bahadur whispered. He looked up at Izuku, confusion warring with instinct. Then, his gaze shifted. He looked at Shigaraki, then at Kurojairi. His expression hardened instantly. The confusion vanished, replaced by the sharp, disciplined glare of a warrior who sensed evil. Demons, Bahadur spat. He moved with a speed that belied his relaxed posture. He lunged toward Shigaraki, his hand forming a blade-like shape, glowing with faint white light. Die, fiend. Whoa! Shigaraki didn't flinch, he just looked annoyed. Hey, NPC. Watch it. Bahadur's hand stopped inches from Shigaraki's face. His body froze, muscles locking up as if he had hit an invisible wall. Veins bulged in his neck as he fought against the restraint. System warning, friendly fire disabled. Command, loyalty enforced. What? Is this sorcery? Bahadur gritted out, sweat beading on his forehead. Izuku scrambled off his stool. Stop! Bahadur, stop! They're allies. Bahadur turned his head slowly, his neck creaking against the magical restraint. He looked at Izuku, a small, bloodied child radiating the dark energy of a necromancer. Allies? Bahadur's voice was filled with disgust. Boy, you reek of death. And these two? They reek of malice. You summon me from my eternal rest to serve villains? Izuku flinched. The word stung. I didn't have a choice. There is always a choice, Bahadur lectured, finally lowering his hand as the system relaxed its grip. He stood up, towering over the boy. Why? Why bring me back? Izuku looked down at his shoes. He thought about the alleyway. He thought about his parents. He thought about the crushing weight of being weak in a world of superheroes. Because I'm weak, Izuku admitted softly. I have this power. This system. But I don't know how to use it. I just swing my scythe and hope things die. If I don't get stronger, I'm going to die. Or worse. He looked up, meeting the hero's gaze. I saw your mural. You died protecting people. I thought, maybe you could protect me too. Bahadur stared at the boy. He saw the darkness, yes. But he also saw the trembling hands and the desperate, lonely eyes. He realized this wasn't a malicious necromancer, it was a frightened child holding a loaded gun. Bahadur sighed, the tension leaving his shoulders. A paladin does not abandon the lost, he muttered to himself. Even if the lost are walking a dark path. He knelt on one knee, bringing himself to Izuku's eye level. Very well, Master Izuku. I cannot harm you, and it seems I cannot harm your associates. But know this, I am a shield, not a butcher. I will train you, but I will not let you lose your soul. Izuku blinked, surprised. You'll stay? I have no choice, Bahadur smirked dryly. And besides, someone needs to teach you how to dress. You look like a potato sack. From the corner, Shigaraki snorted. Great. Now we have a moral compass. Sensei is going to love this. Shopping, Izuku said, opening the menu. We need to get you gear. Points, 10,000. It seemed like a lot, until Izuku opened the weapons tab. Holy Sword of Ascalon, S rank 10 million points. Mithril Longsword, B rank 500,000 points. Steel Longsword, E rank 1,000 points. Inflation is a nightmare, Izuku muttered. I require heavy plate armor, Bahadur said, looking over Izuku's shoulder at the floating blue screen. And a shield blessed by the High Priest. You get a t-shirt and a sharp piece of metal, Izuku corrected. After 10 minutes of arguing, they settled on a loadout. Transaction complete. Minus 1,000 PTS, reinforced steel longsword, E rank, minus 1,000 PTS, light iron breastplate, D rank, minus 500 PTS, casual clothing set, blue hoodie, jeans. Bahadur looked at the hoodie with disdain. This offers 0 protection against magical attacks. It offers plus 5 style, Izuku lied. Now come on. We need to see what you can do. Dungeon create, E rank. The transition was instant. The bar vanished, replaced by the damp, mossy stone of a cavern. Instance, the goblin nest, E rank, objective, slay the goblin king. Goblins, Bahadur scoffed, drawing his new steel sword. Vermin. In my time, we used them for target practice. Don't get cocky, Izuku warned, summoning his scythe. Reaper's best friend. A screech echoed through the cave. 3 green-skinned creatures, barely 3 feet tall, charged from the shadows wielding jagged daggers. Izuku moved to intercept. He raised his scythe, ready to hack and slash like he usually did. Stop, Bahadur commanded. Izuku froze. What? Your stance. It's atrocious. Your feet are too wide. You're telegraphing your swing. Bahadur stepped forward casually. One goblin leaped. Bahadur didn't swing, he simply pivoted his hips and moved the sword forward. The goblin impaled itself on the blade. Clean. Efficient. The second goblin slashed at Bahadur's legs. Bahadur didn't dodge. He stepped into the attack, using his iron breastplate to deflect the dagger, then bashed the goblin in the face with the pommel of his sword. Crack! The third goblin hesitated. Bahadur flicked his wrist, decapitating it. 3 enemies down in 4 seconds. Izuku stared. When he fought, it was messy. It was brutal. When Bahadur fought, it was art. You rely too much on your stats, Bahadur criticized, wiping goblin blood off his blade. You have the strength of a bull but the grace of a drunkard. If you fight a real warrior, you will die. Izuku looked at his scythe. Then teach me. Bahadur smiled. First lesson, footwork. They spent a week in the dungeon, 7 hours in the real world. They cleared the goblin nest 3 times. By the third run, Izuku wasn't just swinging wildly. He was learning to parry. He was learning to use shadow step defensively, not just to run away. When they finally faced the Goblin King, a hulking brute level 15 monster, it wasn't a desperate struggle for survival. It was a coordinated execution. Bahadur drew the aggro, parrying the king's massive club with his shieldless sword technique. Now, Izuku. The tendons. Izuku flashed behind the king. Instead of hacking at the thick neck, he sliced the back of the king's knees. The monster crumpled. Bahadur stepped in, driving his sword through the king's chest. Boss defeated. EXP gained. They sat on the corpse of the boss, catching their breath. You learn quickly, Bahadur admitted, taking a sip of water from Izuku's inventory. For a villain. I'm not a villain, Izuku muttered. I'm just surviving. Survival often looks like villainy to those who are comfortable, Bahadur mused. But remember this, Izuku. Power without purpose is just violence. Find a reason to fight other than fear. Izuku nodded, though he wasn't sure he understood yet. The hideout, secure line. Kurogiri stood in a dark room, facing a monitor. The screen displayed only a sound wave. Report, the deep voice of All for One commanded. The experiment is proceeding beyond expectations, Kurogiri said smoothly. Izuku Midoriya has successfully cleared multiple dungeons. More importantly, he has utilized the invitation mechanic. Oh? He has summoned a hero from the past. A man named Bahadur. A paladin type. There was a pause on the line. Then, a low chuckle. A boy rejected by hero society. Summoning a hero to be his servant. The irony is delicious. Shigaraki is displeased, Kurogiri added. He feels threatened. Good, All for One said. Competition breeds strength. Let them sharpen each other. And Izuku? He is growing stronger. His system seems to be evolving with him. However, he is still naive. He lacks an ideology. He is a blank canvas, Kurogiri, All for One said, his voice dripping with anticipation. And we hold the brush. Continue monitoring him. When he is ready, we will give him a stage to debut. The call ended. Kurogiri adjusted his tie and walked back out to the bar. He found Izuku and Bahadur eating instant ramen. The ancient hero was struggling with chopsticks, while Izuku laughed, correcting his grip. They looked like brothers. Strange, Kurogiri thought. The boy attracts light even in the deepest darkness. 5 years later. The D-rank dungeon was silent, save for the sound of a heavy body hitting the floor. Izuku Midoriya, now 13 years old, stood over the corpse of a giant basilisk. He didn't pant. He didn't celebrate. He just wiped a splatter of green blood off his cheek with a look of utter boredom. He had changed. The baby fat was gone, replaced by lean, corded muscle. His hair was longer, tied back in a messy bun, and his eyes once wide with fear were now sharp and calculating. He wore a black trench coat over combat gear he had scavenged from the shop, looking less like a hero and more like a reaper. Another dud, Izuku muttered, kicking the basilisk's snout. Boss defeated, giant basilisk, LVL 35, EXP gained, 15. 15 experience, Izuku sighed, dismissing the notification with a flick of his finger. At this rate, I'll be 80 before we hit the cap. Bahadur sat on a rock nearby, sharpening his steel longsword. He had also changed. The ancient armor was gone, replaced by modern tactical gear and a t-shirt that said, "Plants are friends," a gift from Izuku. He checked a cheap digital watch on his wrist. Relax, Izuku, Bahadur said, his voice dropping the archaic weight it once held. 5 years of modern TV and convenience store runs had scrubbed the medieval knight right out of him. You can't rush the grind. Besides, my radishes in the real world need watering. Can we bounce? Not yet, Izuku said. He opened his status window. Name, Izuku Midoriya level, 99, EXP, 99.9%. Class, Grim Reaper. It hadn't been all boring dungeon crawls. In the real world, they'd run errands for AFO, meeting shady figures like Overhaul, a germaphobe Izuku didn't care for, and scouting potential recruits. Izuku had even branded their little duo the Black Cross. It's a way better name than the League of Villains, Izuku had told Shigaraki just last week, shouting the League part just to spite the gamer. Your name is way too simple. But the real grind was for points. Izuku switched tabs to the shop, staring at the grail item, Holy Sword of Ascalon, 10 million PTS. He wasn't even halfway there. You know I don't need it, Bahadur said, catching Izuku's gaze. I'm strong enough with this piece of steel. Seriously, save your points. Not good enough, Izuku replied stubbornly. I want you at your peak. Nothing stops us. Bahadur rolled his eyes but didn't argue further. He knew Izuku was stubborn. Fine. But if we're staying, let's wrap this up. One more mob, Izuku said, turning toward the dungeon exit. I can feel it. As if on cue, a small cave slime wiggled out from behind a rock. Izuku didn't even summon his scythe. He pointed a finger. Shadow bullet. A small bolt of dark energy pierced the slime. It dissolved. EXP gained, 1. A chime rang out louder and deeper than usual. The blue box expanded, turning gold. Congratulations. Level 100 reached. Tier 1 cap broken. New feature unlocked, C-rank dungeons. Izuku grinned. It wasn't a nice smile, it was the hungry smile of a predator finally let out of a cage. Finally, he whispered. Bahadur, gear up. We're leaving the kiddie pool. The transition to the C-rank instance was different. Usually, it was instant. This time, there was a sensation of weight, as if gravity had doubled. Instance created, Progenitor's Revenge, C-rank, time dilation, 1 minute, real, 1 day, dungeon, environment, hostile. When Izuku opened his eyes, the first thing he felt was the heat. It wasn't just hot, it was oppressive. The sun hanging in the sky was a massive, angry red orb that seemed too close to the earth. The ground was cracked, dry earth that stretched out into a wasteland of dead, blackened trees. Warning, environmental debuff detected. Status, sun-scorched. Effect, slowly drain stamina and HP while exposed to direct sunlight. By the gods, Bahadur hissed, shielding his eyes. Okay, this heat feels personal. It's draining us, Izuku noted, watching his HP bar tick down by 1 point every few seconds. We need to find cover or finish this quick. Izuku, Bahadur said, pointing his sword. Check that out. Izuku followed the paladin's gaze. In the distance, rising like a mirage from the heat waves, was a fortress. It was built of gray stone, flying a banner with a golden sun. But it wasn't peaceful. Smoke was rising from the walls. And even from this distance, they could hear the screams. People? Izuku frowned. Dungeons usually just have monsters. They are under siege, Bahadur said. The playfulness of the gardening hobbyist vanished instantly. Those are humans on the walls. And those things attacking them. Izuku squinted. Swarming the base of the fortress were hundreds of humanoid figures. They moved like animals, clawing at the stone. Enemy, vampire spawn, underling, LVL 65. Level 65, Izuku whistled. That's a jump from the basilisk. Bahadur didn't wait. They need help. Bahadur, wait. Izuku called out, but the knight was already sprinting, his boots kicking up dust clouds. DMN Hero Complex, Izuku cursed. He summoned his Scythe Reaper's best friend which had grown over the years to match his height, the blade now pulsing with a deeper violet light. He took off after his partner. The battle at the gates was a slaughter. The knights on the wall were wearing shining armor, but it was dented and bloodied. They were holding the line with spears, but the underlings were relentless, climbing over piles of their own dead to reach the parapets. Captain Frederick, a man with graying hair and a jaw like a steel trap, swung his mace, crushing a vampire's skull. Hold the line. Frederick roared. For the pure syndicate. For humanity. Sir. The west gate is buckling, a soldier screamed. Reinforce it. We hold until sunset, or we die try. Frederick stopped. He looked out at the desert. A silver blur smashed into the rear guard of the vampire horde. Bahadur hit the line like a wrecking ball. Light blade. His sword extended with a beam of pure holy energy. He swung in a wide arc, cleaving 3 vampires in half. The monsters shrieked as the holy magic burned their regenerating flesh. Come on then. Bahadur shouted, his voice booming over the din of battle. I'm right here. The vampires turned, hissing at the light. They swarmed him. Frederick watched in horror. He's going to be overrun. Then, the sky darkened. Izuku leaped from a dead tree, spinning in the air. He landed in the center of the swarm surrounding Bahadur. Shadow Scythe, Harvest Moon. Izuku spun. The scythe created a perfect black circle. 10 heads flew into the air simultaneously. The vampires hesitated. They looked at the boy in the black coat, sensing the death radiating off him. You guys give way more XP than slimes, Izuku said, checking his notification log. EXP gained. EXP gained. Bahadur, take the left flank, Izuku ordered, his voice calm amidst the chaos. I'll clean up the middle. You got it, boss. It wasn't a battle. It was a harvest. For 5 years, Izuku and Bahadur had fought monsters while heavily overleveled. They had learned to fight perfectly because one mistake in the early days meant death. Against enemies that were actually a challenge, they were a whirlwind of light and shadow. Within 10 minutes, the horde was broken. The surviving vampires screeched and fled into the shimmering heat of the desert. Izuku stood amidst the dissolving bodies, flicking black ichor off his coat. He checked his stats. Level, finally, he muttered. Open the gates. Frederick's voice rang out from the wall. The inside of the fortress smelled of sweat, iron, and fear. Izuku and Bahadur were surrounded by knights. Spears were pointed at them, but the hands holding them were shaking. Captain Frederick pushed through the circle. He looked at Bahadur's strange mix of tactical gear and t-shirt, then at Izuku's scythe. Who are you? Frederick demanded. You fight like demons, but you saved my men. Izuku stepped forward. He had rehearsed this. We don't know. Frederick frowned. Excuse me? We woke up in the desert about an hour ago, Izuku lied smoothly. My name is Izuku. This is Bahadur. We have no memory of how we got here, or who we were before. We just knew. Those things were enemies. Bahadur nodded solemnly. It's the truth. My mind is a fog. Frederick studied them. He looked at Izuku's eyes, too old for a child, and Bahadur's stance. He didn't believe them. Not fully. But he looked around at his wounded men and the cracked walls of his fortress. We are at war, Frederick said, sheathing his mace. Dracula's forces grow stronger every night. I don't care where you came from. If you can kill vampires like that, you are welcome in the Pure Syndicate. Dracula? Izuku asked, feigning ignorance. The Lord of Vampires, Frederick spat. He seeks to plunge this world into eternal night. We are the last line of defense. He gestured to the main keep. Come. You need to meet the commander. If anyone can figure out what to do with 2 amnesiac super soldiers, it's her. Izuku glanced at Bahadur. They shared a look. Quest accepted. Lead the way, Izuku said. The keep was cooler than the desert outside, but the air was thick with tension. Soldiers scrambled back and forth carrying maps and wounded comrades, ignoring the 2 strangers walking behind Captain Frederick. They stopped in front of a heavy oak door guarded by 2 knights in full plate armor. The guards crossed their halberds. Captain, one guard grunted. The commander is in a foul mood. The supply line from the east was cut. I have news that might improve her mood, Frederick said, gesturing to Izuku and Bahadur. Open it. The door swung open. The room inside was dominated by a massive tactical table covered in wooden figures. Standing over it was a girl who looked no older than 16, though her eyes held the exhaustion of a veteran. She had long pink hair tied back in a severe ponytail and wore a white military coat over a black bodysuit. A katana with a black hilt rested at her hip. She didn't look up. Frederick. If you're here to tell me we lost the West Gate, spare me the report and hand me your resignation. The West Gate holds, Commander, Frederick said, saluting. Thanks to these 2. Syra finally looked up. Her gaze swept over Bahadur's tactical gear and Izuku's scythe. She didn't smile. She didn't offer a greeting. She rested her hand on the hilt of her sword. Mercenaries, she asked, her voice sharp. Amnesiacs, Frederick corrected. They wiped out a horde of elite spawns in 10 minutes. Just the 2 of them. Syra's eyes narrowed. She walked around the table, stopping inches from Izuku. The height difference wasn't much, but her presence was heavy. Amnesiacs, she repeated, tasting the lie. How convenient. 2 super soldiers wander out of the cursed wastes with no memory, right when we're desperate for reinforcements. It's the truth, Izuku said, keeping his face blank. Liar, Syra stated flatly. She drew her katana. The metal hissed against the sheath. Ignite. The blade didn't just catch fire, it became fire. The metal turned a translucent orange, radiating heat so intense that the papers on the tactical table curled and blackened. Warning, high-level threat detected. Skill detected, Ra's Wrath, Bloodline Enchantment. Izuku instinctively reached for his scythe, but Bahadur stepped in front of him, hand on his sword. Easy, Bahadur, Izuku whispered. He focused on the flaming sword. System, analyze. Can I copy it? Analysis complete. Error, unable to copy. Restriction, bloodline DNA required. Skill is locked to the user's genetic code. Izuku grit his teeth. In the lower ranks, he could buy almost any element or skill. But here, power was locked behind genetics. He couldn't just pay to win this time. Syra held the blade steady, the fire reflecting in her eyes. I don't trust you. You reek of secrets. But Frederick is right, we are losing this war. I don't need you to be honest. I need you to be useful. She sheathed the blade. The heat vanished instantly. There is a bunker 10 miles north, Syra said, walking back to the map. It belongs to the Ravenblade faction. They are supplying Dracula with intel on our movements. I sent 3 squads to secure it. None returned. She slammed a wooden piece onto the map. Infiltrate the bunker. Retrieve their intel logs. If you come back alive, I'll believe you're on our side. If you die, well, then I don't have to worry about spies. Izuku looked at the map. It was clearly a suicide mission. A test to see if they were worth the trouble. Quest accepted, the suicide test. Reward, trust of the commander. We'll be back by dawn, Izuku said. Syra smirked, sharp and dangerous. Don't make promises you can't keep, kid. The bunker was buried beneath a dune of black sand. Stealth, Bahadur whispered, crouching behind a rock. Not exactly my specialty. Just don't yell, justice, before you hit someone, Izuku muttered. Shadow step. He dissolved into mist, reappearing behind the lone guard at the entrance. Before the guard could turn, Izuku placed a hand over his mouth. The guard slumped, unconscious but alive. Bahadur moved up, dragging the body into the shadows. Clean. They slipped inside. The interior was sleek metal, lit by red emergency lights. Cameras swept the hallways in predictable arcs. I'll handle the eyes, Izuku said. He flicked his wrist, sending tiny blobs of dark slime to cover the camera lenses. They moved deeper, bypassing patrols. Izuku's map skill filled in the layout as they explored. Barracks. Armory. Command center. Artifact storage. The intel should be in the command center, Bahadur whispered. You get the intel, Izuku said, his eyes locking onto the artifact storage room on his minimap. I feel something pulling me. Bahadur frowned. Izuku, the mission. I'll be right behind you. Just get the files. They split up. Izuku moved toward the heavy blast door marked restricted. He hacked the keypad, a simple minigame for his system. As the numbers aligned, a date flashed briefly on the terminal screen, year 520, era of the sun-scorched. The door hissed open. The room was cold. Shelves lined the walls, filled with strange glowing stones and ancient weapons. But in the center of the room, dominating the space, was a coffin. It stood upright, made of a black metal that seemed to absorb the light. Carved into the surface were endless, spiraling loops. Item, the loop coffin status, sealed. Seal level, S rank. Izuku walked closer. The air around the coffin vibrated with a low hum. It felt like standing next to a nuclear reactor. Why seal a coffin? Izuku whispered. He touched the surface. A riddle appeared in a holographic projection from the system itself, translating the ancient runes. To wake the dreamer, you must speak the name of the nightmare. Hint, she is the first, but she is alone. Izuku thought back to the lore Frederick had mentioned. Dracula was the lord of vampires. But usually, in these stories, there was someone before the lord. A source. He looked at the loops. Endless circles. A cycle with no end. The first, Izuku mused. The progenitor. He traced the loops with his finger. Alice, he guessed, remembering a name from an old book in AFO's library about vampire myths. Or maybe it was just a lucky guess fueled by the Alice in Wonderland vibe of the loops. Click. The locks disengaged. The heavy metal door groaned, swinging open with a blast of pressurized air. Inside was a girl. She was small, pale as moonlight, with white hair that floated around her as if she were underwater. Her eyes were closed. She looked peaceful. Then, she opened her eyes. They were red. Not the angry red of the sun outside, but the deep, blood red of a fresh wound. Izuku froze. His danger sense was screaming so loud it was physically painful. Entity, Alice, progenitor vampire, level? She didn't move. She just stared at him. Then, a wave of pressure, pure, unfiltered killing intent slammed into Izuku. It forced him to his knees. The shelves rattled. Glass cases shattered. Bahadur burst into the room, sword drawn. Izuku! I felt a. He stopped, freezing in the doorway, paralyzed by the sheer weight of her presence. The girl stepped out of the coffin. Her bare feet touched the cold metal floor. What year is it? She asked. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the room like a bell. Izuku struggled to breathe against the pressure. It's the era of the sun-scorched. Year 520. Alice tilted her head. Her expression remained blank, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. 500 years, she whispered. He left me in here for 500 years. The killing intent spiked, cracking the floor beneath her feet. "Where is Nicholas?" she asked, looking at Izuku. "Where is the bstrd who calls himself Dracula?" Izuku swallowed blood. He looked up at the girl who was radiating enough power to level the bunker. "I think," Izuku wheezed, "we have a common enemy." The pressure in the artifact storage room changed the moment Alice stepped out of the coffin. It wasn't the crushing weight of killing intent not anymore. It was something heavier, sadder. It was the weight of 5 centuries of silence crashing down all at once. Izuku Midoriya stood his ground, though his danger sense was humming like a plucked wire against the base of his skull. Beside him, Bahadur gripped the hilt of his sword, his knuckles white. The paladin wasn't reacting to a threat to his life, but to the sheer unnatural presence of the girl. Alice stumbled. Her bare foot slipped on the smooth metal floor, her legs trembling under her own weight. She caught herself on the edge of the coffin, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. 500 years, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the bunker's ventilation. He actually did it. She looked up at Izuku. Her red eyes were dull, lacking the vibrancy they likely held in her prime. "Dracula. I cannot believe he actually took that ridiculous title." "He rules over the wasteland outside," Izuku said, keeping his voice steady. "He claims to be the lord of all vampires." Alice let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Lord? Nicholas couldn't even lead a horse to water without asking for directions. And now he plays king in a castle built on my blood." She pushed herself off the coffin, trying to stand tall, but her knees buckled. She was starving. Not the kind of hunger that could be fixed with a sandwich, but a deep, metaphysical hollowness. Bahadur stepped forward, his instinct to help overriding his prejudice against the undead. "She is weak, Izuku. Whatever power she holds, it is fading." "I am not fading," Alice snapped, though the lack of force in her voice betrayed her. She leaned heavily against the shelves, knocking over a display case of ancient daggers. "I just need a moment." Izuku watched her. He saw the way her eyes darted to the pulsing veins in his neck, then immediately jerked away, as if ashamed of the instinct. She wasn't a monster looking for a meal. She was a person fighting her own biology. He made a decision. Inventory open. He scrolled past his weapons and materials. He didn't have much in the way of supplies for a vampire, but he remembered a specific item he had bought by mistake during a mystery box sale years ago. Item: high-grade blood potion. Description: synthetic blood substitute. Restores HP and satiety for vampiric entities. Tastes like iron and regret. "Here," Izuku said, retrieving the vial. It glowed with a deep crimson light. Alice flinched when he moved, but when she smelled the contents, her eyes widened. "Is that?" "It's not real blood," Izuku clarified quickly. "It's a substitute. Synthetic. No one had to die for it." Alice stared at the vial, then at Izuku. A look of genuine surprise crossed her face. "You carry this?" "Why?" "I keep a lot of things," Izuku lied smoothly. "You need it more than I do. Take it." He tossed the vial gently. Alice caught it with a dexterity that belied her exhaustion. She didn't hesitate, she uncorked it and downed the liquid in a single gulp. She grimaced, sticking her tongue out. "By the ancients, that is foul. It tastes like rusted copper and chemicals." "It gets the job done," Izuku shrugged. Color rushed back into Alice's cheeks. The trembling in her legs stopped. She stood up straight, smoothing down the front of her white dress. It was pristine, untouched by the rot of time, likely preserved by the same magic that held the seal. "It will suffice," Alice said, wiping her mouth. She looked at Izuku, then at Bahadur. Her gaze lingered on the paladin's holy symbol. A necromancer and a paladin. Walking together. "I must still be dreaming." "We represent the pure syndicate," Izuku said. "And if you want to get to Nicholas, we're your best shot." Alice considered this. She looked at the bunker walls, then at her own hands. "I suppose I have little choice. I do not know this world anymore." "Very well. Lead the way." The journey back to the Pure Syndicate's fortress was quiet. The sun had finally dipped below the horizon, but the heat remained, radiating off the black sand like an open oven. The sky was a bruised purple, lit only by the distant, crackling lightning of the storm surrounding Dracula's tower. Alice walked between them. She didn't complain about the heat. She seemed entranced by the destruction around her. She stopped occasionally to touch a dead, petrified tree or sift the black sand through her fingers. This was a valley, she murmured. There were rivers. Villages. Humans and vampires lived. Well, not together, but close enough. "He scorched it all," Bahadur said grimly. "To create an environment where his kind could thrive during the day. He destroyed the ecosystem to save on sunscreen," Alice muttered, shaking her head. Typical Nicholas. Always the dramatic solution. As the fortress came into view, the tension returned. Izuku could see the torches on the walls and the silhouettes of guards patrolling. "Listen," Izuku said, stopping the group. "The people in there. They've been fighting your kind for decades. They aren't going to be happy to see you." "I am not their kind," Alice said, her voice turning cold. "But I understand. Humans are quick to fear what they do not understand." "Just let me do the talking," Izuku requested. They approached the gates. Captain Frederick was waiting for them, leaning over the battlements. When he saw Izuku and Bahadur, he waved for the gates to open. But as the heavy wood groaned inward, and the torchlight fell upon Alice's pale skin and red eyes, the mood shifted instantly. "Hold!" Frederick shouted. "Close the gate. They've brought a prisoner. No, a monster. She's a survivor." Izuku lied, shouting up at the wall. "She was trapped in the Ravenblade bunker. Look at her eyes, boy!" Frederick roared. "That is a vampire. Archers. Wait." Bahadur stepped forward, his voice booming. "Captain. We retrieved the intel. She helped us. She is not an enemy." The archers hesitated. Frederick looked conflicted. But before the standoff could resolve, the air temperature spiked. The knights at the gate scrambled aside as a figure strode through the courtyard. Commander Syra. She wasn't wearing her usual white coat. She was in combat gear, and her katana was already drawn. The blade wasn't just glowing, it was roaring with orange flame, so hot the air distorted around her. "I sensed it from the command room," Syra said, her voice low and dangerous. She stopped 10 yards from Alice. The smell of ancient blood. Rotting. Powerful. "Commander, don't," Izuku warned, stepping forward. "Step aside, mercenary," Syra snapped. "You brought a leech into my home. A progenitor, if my senses are correct." She raised her sword. "Ignite, max output." The flames turned white. The sand at her feet turned to glass. "Die." Syra moved. It was a blur of motion, a flash step that closed the distance instantly. She swung the katana in a horizontal arc aimed directly at Alice's neck. It was a kill shot. Fast. Brutal. Unavoidable. Alice didn't flinch. She didn't retreat. She simply raised her left hand. Clang. The sound was like a church bell being struck by a sledgehammer. A shockwave blasted outward, knocking Izuku and Bahadur back a few steps. Dust plumed into the air. When the dust settled, the fortress went silent. Alice had stopped the blade with her index finger. The white-hot flames licked at her skin, but they couldn't burn her. It was as if an invisible barrier of sheer pressure was keeping the heat at bay. Alice looked bored. "Rude," she stated simply. Syra's eyes went wide. She gritted her teeth, veins bulging in her forehead as she poured more mana into the blade. "Burn. Why won't you burn?" "You wield the sun," Alice noted, observing the blade. "But you wield it like a child holding a sparkler." She flicked her finger. It wasn't a punch. It wasn't a spell. It was just a flick. The force of it launched Syra backward. The commander flew through the air, crashing through a stack of wooden crates and slamming into the stone wall of the keep. She slumped to the ground, coughing, her sword clattering away. The knights screamed, leveling their spears. "Enough!" Bahadur roared. He placed himself between Alice and the knights, his arms spread wide. "Look!" Bahadur commanded. "She is not attacking. She defended herself. If she wanted the commander dead, she would be dead." Syra pulled herself up, wiping blood from her lip. She looked at Alice, her eyes filled with a mix of hatred and terrifying realization. "What? Are you?" Syra wheezed. Alice dusted off her white dress. "I am the reason you are fighting this war, Commander. And I am here to end it." The War Council. An hour later, the four of them sat in the war room. The tactical map was cleared. Frederick stood by the door, hand on his mace, sweating profusely. Syra sat opposite Alice. She hadn't sheathed her dagger. "Talk," Syra demanded. "And if I don't like what I hear, I will burn this fortress down with you inside it." Alice sighed. She looked at the wooden map pieces, moving a small black tower to the center of the table. "To understand why I must kill him," Alice said softly, "you must understand who he was." The room seemed to darken as Alice closed her eyes, pulling them into a memory she had replayed 1,000 times in the dark. Flashback, 520 years ago. The world was different then. It was colder. Wilder. I was alone. I had been alone since the moment I opened my eyes in a shallow grave, with no memory of a mother or father. Humans hunted me. They called me a witch. A demon. I learned to hide in the shadows, to feed on rats and deer. Then, I found him. He was dying on the side of a dirt road. A soldier, abandoned by his unit after taking a spear to the gut. He was pathetic. He was crying for his mother. I should have left him. But I was lonely. So terribly lonely. I gave him my blood. I turned him. I expected him to be horrified, to try and kill me like the others. But he didn't. He looked at me with worship. "You are an angel," he had said. His name was Nicholas. For 100 years, we were happy. We traveled. We gathered others who were cast out. We built the sanctuary in the valley. It was a place for us. We didn't hunt humans, we lived off livestock. We were peaceful. But Nicholas. He changed. The immortality rotted him. He began to see humans not as neighbors, but as cattle. He gathered follower Silas, the warrior who loved battle more than breath. Alastor, the brute strength. Lilith, the woman who looked at Nicholas like he was a god. I tried to stop him. I told him we could not live like monsters. "We are gods, Alice," he told me. "Why should gods bow to sheep?" The betrayal didn't happen on a battlefield. It happened at a dinner table. It was the anniversary of the sanctuary. Nicholas proposed a toast. He poured the wine himself. He smiled at me, that same warm smile he had given me when I saved his life. I drank. It burned. It wasn't wine. It was a mixture of concentrated holy water and wolfsbane, distilled to a potency that would kill a lesser vampire instantly. My body seized. I fell to the floor, paralyzed. I looked up at him. I couldn't speak, but my eyes begged him. "Why?" Nicholas stood over me. He didn't look malicious. He looked disappointed. "You are too soft, Alice," he whispered. "You are the progenitor. Your blood holds the power of creation. But you refuse to use it. So, I will use it for you. They didn't kill me. They couldn't. I am the source. If I die, the bloodline weakens. So they put me in the coffin. They sealed it with arts lost to time." The last thing I heard before the lid closed was Nicholas telling his generals to drink deep. "They have been draining me for 5 centuries. Every drop of power they have is mine." Present day. Alice opened her eyes. The room was silent. Even Frederick looked horrified. "He stole everything," Alice said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "My trust. My family. My blood. He turned my sanctuary into a slaughterhouse." She looked at Syra. "You hate vampires because they kill your people. I hate them because they are a perversion of what I created. We are not enemies, Commander." Syra stared at her for a long time. Slowly, she took her hand off her dagger. "Dracula is protected," Syra said, her voice gruff. "The Tower of Night has 3 floors. Each one guards a seal." "The generals," Alice nodded. "Silas. Alastor. Lilith. They are monsters," Syra warned. "Alastor can shatter stone with his bare hands. Lilith wields magic that twists the mind. And Silas. Silas was the strongest," Alice admitted. A flicker of pain crossed her face. "He was loyal. Once. We divide and conquer," Izuku spoke up, pointing at the map. "The army distracts the main force outside. We infiltrate the tower. We take out the generals one by one." Bahadur nodded. "A strike team. It is risky, but it avoids a protracted siege we cannot win." Syra stood up. She looked at the 3 of them, a child reaper, a fallen knight, and the mother of all vampires. "It's a suicide mission," Syra said. A small, feral grin tugged at the corner of her mouth. "I'm in." They left within the hour. The trek to the Tower of Night took them through the heart of the corrupted valley. The ground here wasn't just dry, it was dead. The sand was black powder that coated their boots. Izuku checked his status. Level 101 party, Black Cross, full. He looked at his team. Bahadur walked point, his shield arm ready, scanning for threats. He was the shield. Syra walked the flank, her hand resting on her katana, radiating heat. She was the sword. Alice walked in the center, weak but resolute. She was the objective. "You realize," Alice said softly to Izuku as they walked, "that even if we win, I have nothing left. My world is dead." "Not dead," Izuku said, looking at the stars struggling to shine through the purple clouds. "Just broken. We can fix broken things." "Or," Alice murmured, looking at him with curious red eyes, "we can build something new." Ahead of them, the tower loomed. It was a jagged spire of obsidian that pierced the sky, surrounded by a swirling vortex of purple storm clouds. It looked like a giant stake driven into the heart of the world. At the base, the massive iron gates stood wide open. "He knows we're here," Bahadur said, tightening his grip on his sword. "Of course he does," Alice said. Her face hardened into a mask of cold, regal fury. "He wants to show off his throne." Izuku summoned his scythe. The purple energy hummed in the dark air. "Let's go," Izuku said. "Class is in session." They stepped across the threshold, and the darkness swallowed them whole. The interior of the Tower of Night did not look like a fortress. It looked like a shrine. The massive iron gates slammed shut behind them with a finality that echoed through the vast, vaulted chamber. The air here was cool and smelled faintly of lavender and rata perfume meant to mask the scent of a grave. Black marble pillars stretched up into the darkness above, carved with reliefs of vampires feasting on humans. At the far end of the hall, a grand staircase spiraled upward, bathed in the eerie glow of purple mana crystals. "It's quiet," Syra whispered, her hand tightening on the hilt of her katana. The flames on her blade sputtered, reacting to the dense, suffocating atmosphere of the tower. "Too quiet." "He knows we are here," Alice said, her voice echoing slightly in the empty space. She walked with her head held high, though Izuku noticed her hands were trembling. Nicholas always did have a flair for the dramatic. "He is waiting." "Then let us not keep him," Bahadur said, stepping forward. His steel boots clanked loudly on the polished floor. As they reached the center of the hall, the shadows beneath the staircase began to writhe. They didn't move like shadows, they moved like liquid. They coalesced, rising up to form a silhouette that stepped elegantly into the light. It was a woman. She was tall, wearing a black gothic dress that hugged her curves, with long, obsidian hair that cascaded down to her ankles like a dark waterfall. Her lips were painted a deep crimson, and her eyes were the color of amethyst. Entity, Lilith, General of the first floor, level, 105 status, obsessed. "Welcome," Lilith said, performing a polite curtsy. Her voice was smooth, like velvet wrapped around a razor blade. "The master is currently indisposed on the 3rd floor. He asked that you wait here. Or, preferably, die here." Her gaze slid past Izuku, past Bahadur, and locked onto Alice. The polite mask cracked, revealing a flash of pure, unadulterated venom. "And you," Lilith hissed. "You actually came back. I thought you would have the decency to rot quietly in your box." Alice stopped. She looked at Lilith not with anger, but with pity. "Hello, Lilith. I see you are still playing the role of the dutiful maid. I am his general." Lilith shrieked, her hair flaring out behind her like a cobra's hood. "I am the one who stood by his side while you slept. I am the one he relies on. You are nothing but a memory, Alice. A ghost he refuses to exorcise." "He relies on you," Alice corrected softly, "because you look like me." The silence that followed was deafening. Lilith's face twisted. The beauty vanished, replaced by a mask of monstrous rage. "I am nothing like you." The floor exploded. It wasn't a bomb. It was hair. Lilith's hair shot forward, hundreds of black tendrils hardening into spikes as thick as spears. They moved faster than arrows, aiming to skew the entire party in a single strike. "Scatter!" Izuku screamed. He grabbed Alice and dove to the left, using Shadow Step to blur out of the kill zone. Syra launched herself upward, her boots igniting to propel her into the air. Bahadur didn't dodge. He stepped forward, planting his feet. He swung his sword in a blurred arc of steel. Clang clang clang. The hair spears deflected off his blade and his D-rank breastplate. The impact forced him back a foot, digging furrows into the marble floor, but he held his ground. "Go!" Bahadur roared over his shoulder. "Get to the stairs. I will hold her. She's strong." Izuku shouted, summoning his scythe to deflect a stray tendril. "You can't solo her. I am the shield." Bahadur yelled back, parrying a strike that would have taken Izuku's head off. "My defense is the highest among us. If we fight together in this narrow hall, we will trip over each other. Go. I will catch up." Izuku hesitated. He looked at the massive wall of hair separating them from the stairs. He looked at Bahadur's determined back. "Trust him," Syra said, landing beside Izuku. "The paladin is tough. We need to save our strength for the upper floors." Izuku gritted his teeth. "Don't die, Bahadur. That's an order." "I haven't got permission to die yet, Izuku." Bahadur grinned. Izuku grabbed Alice's hand. "Syra, cover me. We're breaking through." Syra unleashed a wave of fire, burning a hole through the wall of hair. Izuku and Alice sprinted through the gap, dashing up the grand staircase. Lilith screamed, trying to redirect her attacks to stop them, but a beam of white light slammed into her chest, forcing her to recoil. "Eyes on me, witch." Bahadur challenged, standing alone in the center of the hall. "Your opponent is the paladin." Lilith watched the others disappear up the stairs. She turned back to Bahadur, her eyes glowing with hate. "Fine," she spat. "I will tear you apart first. Then I will mount your head on the master's wall." The battle was a storm of steel and shadow. Bahadur was level, Lilith was level. The gap in raw stats wasn't huge, but the matchup was a nightmare. Lilith didn't move from her spot. She didn't have to. Her hair controlled the entire battlefield. It lashed out from the floor, the walls, the ceiling. It formed hammers to crush him, spears to pierce him, and whips to ensnare him. Bahadur moved with an efficiency born of 1,000 battles. He didn't waste movement. He parried just enough to deflect the lethal blows, letting the glancing hit spark against his armor. Slash. Parry. Dodge. Bash. He was closing the distance, step by agonizing step. Why do you fight for him? Lilith asked, her voice echoing from everywhere at once. A tendril lashed out, slicing Bahadur's cheek. You reek of holiness. Of light. Yet you serve a necromancer? A boy who plays with death. Bahadur grunted, ducking under a scythe-like construct of hair. You wouldn't understand. I understand devotion, Lilith hissed. I understand giving everything to a master who barely looks at you. You are a hypocrite, knight. You preach justice while serving a villain. He is not a villain, Bahadur said, slicing through a thick cluster of hair. He is a child who was given a weapon instead of a toy. And he is trying to use it to save people. Save people? Lilith laughed, a high, manic sound. He is invading a sovereign kingdom. He is helping the progenitor, the woman who abandoned us. She didn't abandon you, Bahadur corrected, panting slightly. She was betrayed. By the man you love? Lilith froze. The hair stopped moving for a split second. Love, she whispered. You think I don't know he doesn't love me? You think I don't know? The air in the room grew heavy. Every time he looks at me, Lilith said, her voice trembling. He sees her. He made me grow my hair long like hers. He made me wear dresses like hers. He made me learn her mannerisms. I am not his lover. I am his doll. She looked at Bahadur, tears of black ichor streaming down her face. But if I kill her, if I wipe Alice from existence, then he will have to look at me. He will have no choice but to see Lilith. The hair exploded outward. It wasn't a coordinated attack this time. It was a chaotic, emotional outburst. Thousands of needles shot through the air. Bahadur raised his sword, but there were too many. Thud, thud, thud. Needles pierced his arms, his legs, his shoulders. Bahadur staggered. My body. Why is it so heavy? He gasped. I can't move. Bahadur fell to one knee. His limbs felt like they were made of lead. The poison burned in his veins, locking his muscles. You see? Lilith walked toward him, her hair forming a massive executioner's blade above her head. Devotion is pain, knight. We are both slaves to our love. But my love is stronger. Bahadur looked up. His vision was blurring. He saw the blade hovering above him. He thought of Izuku, the boy who had spent 10,000 points on gear for him instead of buying power for himself. The boy who had named their group Black Cross because he wanted them to carry the burden together. You are wrong, Bahadur wheezed. I am not a SLV. I am a friend. He gripped his sword. His muscles screamed in protest, but he forced them to move. And my loyalty. Bahadur closed his eyes. He reached deep inside himself, past the mana, past the stamina, to the very core of his soul. To the divine spark that had made him a hero in his past life. I am the light that casts no shadow. I am the shield that does not break. Divine art, Sunbreaker. The air in the tower vanished. A pillar of golden light erupted from Bahadur's body. It tore through the ceiling, piercing the upper floors, blasting through the obsidian roof and into the stormy sky above. The paralysis burned away instantly. Lilith shrieked, shielding her eyes. What is this level of divinity? I am not like you, Bahadur said. He stood up, wreathed in golden fire. His eyes were pure white. And I am not just a knight. He raised his sword. The blade extended, formed of pure, solidified sunlight. It was 20 feet long. I am the morning star that heralds the dawn. He swung. Lilith tried to bring her hair up to block, but the light passed through the darkness as if it weren't there. The blade bisected the room. It cut through the pillars. It cut through the hair. It cut through Lilith. There was no blood. The heat of the attack vaporized her instantly. Nicholas. Lilith whispered, her body dissolving into ash. Look at me. Please. The light faded. Bahadur stood alone in the ruined hall. His armor was smoking. His skin was gray. The golden aura flickered and died. The divine strength left his body as quickly as it had come, replaced by a cold, hollow ache in his very soul. The sword slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. Bahadur collapsed face-first onto the marble. He couldn't move. The poison was gone, but his energy was spent. He stared sideways at the grand staircase. Go, Izuku, Bahadur whispered to the empty room, his eyes sliding shut. The rest is up to you. Izuku, Alice, and Syra sprinted up the spiral stairs. They felt the tower shake. They burst through the double doors onto the second floor. If the first floor was a cathedral, the second floor was a slaughterhouse. The walls were lined with chains and hooks. Piles of bones, some human, some beast, littered the corners. In the center of the room was a fighting pit filled with sand. Standing in the pit was a giant. He was easily 7 feet tall, bald, with skin the color of bruised plums. He wore nothing but loose pants and iron gauntlets that dripped with fresh blood. Entity, Alaster, General of the 2nd floor, level, 108 status, hungry. Alaster turned. He smiled, revealing rows of sharpened shark-like teeth. One down, Alaster boomed, his voice shaking the dust from the ceiling. Little Lilith fell. I felt her light go out. He looked at the three of them. So, Alaster cracked his knuckles. Which one of you wants to be pulverized first? Syra stepped forward. She unclasped her cloak, letting it fall to the floor. She drew her katana, the flames igniting with a roar. Go, Syra said to Izuku. Take Alice to the top. Syra, Izuku warned. He's strong. Like a tank. And I'm a blowtorch, Syra smirked, though sweat was already beading on her forehead. This guy relies on brute strength. My fire counters flesh. Besides. She looked back at Izuku. You're the only one who can deal with Silas. And Alice needs to be there for the end. I'll hold the brute. Alaster laughed. A little girl with a lighter? Come here, little morsel. Let me break your spine. Syra's eyes flared. Ignite, blue flame. The fire turned azure. Get moving, Izuku. Syra shouted, charging the giant. Izuku didn't argue. He grabbed Alice's arm and they sprinted for the next set of stairs, leaving the sun-forged samurai to dance with the giant. 2 generals down. 1 to go. The 2nd floor of the Tower of Night smelled of old blood and heated iron. It was a stark contrast to the Gothic elegance of the floor below. Here, there were no marble pillars or velvet drapes. The walls were rough-hewn obsidian, lined with rusted hooks and chains that rattled in the draft. The floor was a fighting pit filled with gray sand, stained black in patches where gladiators or victims had fallen. Commander Syra stood alone in the center of the pit. Above her, the spiral staircase vibrated as Izuku and Alice ascended to the 3rd floor. Below her, the ground shook rhythmically, the tremors of Bahadur's battle with Lilith echoing through the stone like a heartbeat. They left you, Alaster grunted. The general of the 2nd floor cracked his neck. The sound was like a gunshot. He stood 7 feet tall, a mountain of purple muscle and scarred flesh. He wore iron gauntlets that looked heavy enough to crush a tank, and his eyes yellow and reptilian were fixed on Syra with a mix of amusement and hunger. They didn't leave me, Syra corrected, flicking her katana to the side to clear a speck of dust. I told them to go. There's a difference. Alaster laughed. It was a wet, guttural sound. You think you can hold me back? Little girl, I have eaten knights in armor who were bigger than you. I have snapped spines thicker than your waist. You are not a warrior. You are a snack. Syra didn't flinch. She had heard it all before. Too small. Too young. Too pretty to be a commander. You talk too much, Syra said. She bent her knees, lowering her center of gravity. Her mana flared. Ignite, blue flame. The orange fire wreathing her katana hissed and changed color. It shifted to a brilliant, roaring azure. The heat in the room spiked instantly. The chains on the walls began to glow cherry red. Alaster's grin widened. Fire? I like fire. It cooks the meat. He charged. For a creature of his size, he was terrifyingly fast. He crossed the fighting pit in 2 strides, raising a fist the size of a wrecking ball. Syra didn't try to block. She knew her limits. If she tried to parry that strike, her bones would shatter. She dodged. She slipped under his guard, spinning like a top. Her blade lashed out, trailing a ribbon of blue fire. Sizzle. She cut a deep gash into Alaster's thigh. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Alaster didn't even stumble. He slammed his fist into the sand where she had been standing a microsecond ago. The impact created a shockwave that knocked Syra off balance. She rolled, coming up in a crouch 10 feet away. She looked at the wound she had inflicted. It was already closing. Smoke rose from the cut as the purple skin knit itself back together. Within seconds, there wasn't even a scar. Is that it? Alaster asked, looking at his leg. It stings. Like a mosquito bite. Syra grit her teeth. Regeneration. High-speed regeneration. Just my luck. I can burn faster than you can heal, Syra promised. She attacked again. This time, she didn't stop moving. She became a blue blur, circling the giant. She slashed his tendons. She pierced his kidneys. She enveloped his head in a sphere of fire. Alaster roared, swiping blindly at the air. He looked like a bear trying to swat a wasp. Syra was landing hits. Dozens of them. But for every cut she made, 2 more healed. She was burning mana to keep the blue flame active, sweat pouring down her face as the temperature in the room climbed to oven-like levels. He's not slowing down, Syra realized with a spike of panic. He's getting faster. Found you. Alaster predicted her movement. Instead of swinging where she was, he swung where she was going to be. His backhand caught her midair. Crack. The sound of her ribs breaking was louder than the fire. Syra was launched across the room. She smashed into the obsidian wall, crumpling to the floor. Her sword skittered away. She tried to inhale, but a sharp, jagged pain in her chest cut her breath short. She coughed, tasting copper. Pathetic, Alastor sneered, walking slowly toward her. The humans send children to fight their wars. No wonder you are losing. Syra tried to push herself up. Her left arm trembled and gave out. You rely on tricks, Alastor lectured, towering over her. Fire. Magic. Speed. But in the end, flesh wins. Muscle wins. I am the pinnacle of evolution, little girl. And you. You are fragile. He raised his foot, ready to crush her skull. Syra stared at the boot hovering above her. Fragile. The word echoed in her mind, unlocking a door she usually kept bolted shut. It was raining the day she was promoted. She was 12 years old. She stood in the mud of the training grounds, holding a wooden sword that felt too heavy. She's a prodigy, the instructors whispered. The blood of the sun god flows in her veins. She's a glass cannon, others said. Powerful magic, but look at her. A stiff breeze would knock her over. Syra hated them. She hated the pity. She hated the expectations. She was an orphan raised by the syndicate for one purpose, to be a weapon against the dark. They treated her like a valuable artifact, something to be polished and pointed at the enemy, but never risked. She remembered the first time she summoned the flames. It hurt. It felt like her blood was boiling. But when she burned the target dummy to ash, the instructors clapped. Good, they said. But stay back. Let the knights take the hits. You just shoot. Stay back. Hide. Be safe. She looked at the banner of the Pure Syndicate. The golden sun. It represented hope. Strength. But to her, it represented a cage. I am not a cannon, Syra whispered to the rain. I am a warrior. She started training in secret. She stopped relying on ranged attacks. She picked up a katana. She learned to fight up close, where the fire could burn her as much as her enemies. She forged her body until she wasn't just a vessel for magic, but a soldier. But deep down, the fear remained. The fear that they were right. That without her fire, she was just a small, weak girl. Syra looked at Alastor's foot. No. She rolled. The stomp cracked the stone floor right where her head had been. Syra scrambled to her feet, ignoring the screaming agony in her ribs. She didn't reach for her fallen sword. She backed away, creating distance. Still moving? Alastor sounded impressed. Why? You can't win. You can't hurt me. You're right, Syra wheezed, clutching her side. Syra the commander can't hurt you. Syra the human can't hurt you. She closed her eyes. But I am not just Syra. She reached inside. Past the pain. Past the mana. To the burning core of her DNA. To the bloodline that had been passed down through generations of warriors who worshipped the sun. Hark! Syra shouted, her voice gaining a strange, resonant quality. O great Ra, god of the sun's rays. Alastor paused. Praying? Good. Pray to me. Lend thine ear to my humble plea. Syra continued, her eyes snapping open. They weren't pink anymore. They were gold. Molten, liquid gold. The room began to shake. Not from Alastor, and not from Bahadur below. It shook from the pressure radiating off the girl in the corner. Let thy light shine down upon me. And bestow strength and vigor upon my soul. Alastor frowned. The air was getting too hot. Even for him. His regeneration was slowing down because his cells were starting to boil. Shut up. Alastor charged. With thy guidance, lead me through the netherworld. Syra didn't move. She let him come. And kindle the shadow within me. Alastor pulled back his fist for a killing blow. May your eye of Horus watch over me. The fist came down. And your ankh of life empower me. Boom. Alastor hit something. But it wasn't flesh. It felt like punching the surface of a star. He screamed, pulling his hand back. His iron gauntlet had melted. His skin was charred black. What? Alastor stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the blinding light. Standing in the corner was no longer a girl in a bodysuit. Syra floated inches off the ground. Her pink hair had turned a deep, blood-red crimson, flowing upward as if underwater. But it was her armor that stole the breath from the room. She was encased in a full suit of Yoroi ancient samurai armor constructed entirely of solidified sunlight. The plates glowed with a divine brilliance. A disk of pure light hovered behind her head like a halo, and a serpent of fire coiled around her shoulders. She raised her hand. Her fallen katana flew from across the room, catching fire as it landed in her palm. The blade transformed, extending into a massive odachi made of white plasma. Syra looked down at Alastor through the glowing visor of her helmet. Her voice was layered, echoing with the power of a god. You called me fragile, Syra said. She took a step. The obsidian floor melted into lava beneath her boot. Let's see how durable you are against the wrath of a star. Alastor roared, fear turning into aggression. I am Alastor. I am the unbreakable wall. He slammed his hands together, his purple skin hardening, turning gray like stone. He charged, a living boulder of muscle and hate. Syra didn't dodge this time. She swung. Solar flare, first cut. The blade passed through Alastor's arm. There was no resistance. It cut through the iron gauntlet, the hardened skin, the bone, and the muscle as if they were mist. Alastor's arm fell to the floor. Before blood could spill, the wound cauterized. Arg! Alastor stared at his stump in disbelief. My arm. Why isn't it healing? You can't heal Ash, Syra stated coldly. She moved. She was no longer a blue blur. She was a flash of light. She appeared behind him. A slash across the back of his knees. Alastor fell. She appeared in front of him. A move through his shoulder. Alastor screamed. You rely on regeneration, Syra lectured, circling him. The heat radiating from her armor was turning the sand in the pit to glass. You got lazy. You stopped dodging because you knew you could heal. But against me, every hit is permanent. Alastor looked up, terror in his reptilian eyes. He was huge, powerful, a general of Dracula's army. But right now, kneeling in the glass pit, he looked small. Wait. Alastor pleaded, raising his remaining hand. I surrender. I can serve you. I have strength. Syra stopped. The visor of her helmet faded, revealing her face. Her eyes were burning with cold fury. My friends are fighting upstairs, she said softly. They are trusting me to handle the trash. She raised the massive sword of light above her head. The halo behind her spun, gathering mana from the very air. The room turned white. Ultimate art, supernova execution. She brought the blade down. It wasn't a cut. It was an erasure. A pillar of solar fire engulfed Alastor. He didn't even have time to scream. His iron gauntlets vaporized. His bones turned to dust. His shadow was burned into the wall behind him. The explosion blew the heavy iron doors off their hinges. When the light faded, there was nothing left of the general. Only a scorch mark on the floor. The golden armor flickered. That's... Syra gasped. The light shattered. The armor dissolved into sparks. Syra fell to her knees, her hair fading back to pink. She caught herself on her hands, vomiting clear liquid. Her mana was gone. Her stamina was negative. The pain in her broken ribs returned tenfold. That's, she whispered. She looked toward the stairs leading to the third floor. She tried to stand, but her legs refused to listen. She collapsed onto her side, the heat of the room slowly fading into a chill. Izuku. Alice, she murmured, her vision tunneling. Don't lose. The stairs to the third floor were long and winding. Izuku and Alice ran in silence. The stone walls around them vibrated with the force of the battle raging below. Intense heat drafted up the stairwell, carrying the roar of blue flames and the crash of shattering obsidian. She's holding him, Izuku said, glancing back into the sweltering darkness. Alastor is a monster, Alice said, gripping her dress. But Syra. She burns brighter than I expected. We have to keep moving, Izuku said, turning his eyes to the path ahead. They reached the top of the stairs. There were no doors here. Just an archway leading into darkness. Wait, Izuku stopped Alice before she could enter. Too quiet. Silas, Alice whispered. The Lancer. He was always the silent type. She stepped through the archway. The third floor was different. It wasn't a fighting pit or a grand hall. It was a library. Massive bookshelves lined the walls, filled with ancient tomes. In the center of the room sat a grand organ. A figure sat at the organ, his back to them. He wore a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. A long spear rested against the bench. He was playing music. A haunting, melancholic melody that seemed to weep. Silas, Alice said. The music stopped. The figure stood up slowly. He turned. He was handsome in a sharp, dangerous way, with pale skin and long dark hair. But his eyes were empty. Lady Alice, Silas said. He bowed low. I have waited 500 years to apologize. Apologize? Alice asked, stepping forward. You poisoned me, Silas. You helped him seal me. I did, Silas admitted. He picked up his spear. The weapon hummed with a dark, cursed energy. I had no choice. Nicholas. He holds my heart. Literally. He opened his coat. Where his heart should have been, there was a hole. A dark crystal pulsed in the cavity. He controls me, Silas said sadly. He controls us all. I cannot let you pass, my lady. Even though I wish for nothing more than for you to kill him. He spun the spear. Izuku, Alice said, her voice hard. What? Izuku looked at her. Alice shook her head. Dracula is just beyond this room. If we fight Silas together, we waste time. And every second Nicholas has to prepare is a second closer to our defeat. She looked at Izuku. I need to face Nicholas alone. It has to be me. But I cannot fight Silas and save my strength for the king. Izuku understood. Bahadur took the first floor. Saira took the second. You want me to take the third, Izuku said. He is the strongest of the three, Alice warned. He is fast. Faster than you. Can you hold him? Izuku summoned his scythe. He looked at the lancer, checking the stats. Entity, Silas, General of the third floor, level, 110 status, cursed puppet. Go, Izuku said, stepping between Alice and the general. I'll keep him busy. Alice nodded. She didn't look back. She sprinted past Silas, heading for the final door at the back of the library. Silas moved to intercept, his spear moving forward like a viper strike. Clang. Izuku blocked it with his scythe. The impact rattled his teeth, sliding him back 5 feet, but he held the line. Your opponent, Izuku grunted, his eyes glowing with dark energy, is the Grim Reaper. Alice disappeared through the door. Izuku stood alone in the library against the strongest general. Very well, Silas said, his expression mournful. Let us dance, boy. Until one of us breaks. The third floor of the Tower of Night was suffocatingly quiet. The only sounds were the whistling of the wind outside the obsidian walls and the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of Silas's spear against the marble floor. Izuku, level 101, stood behind a row of towering bookshelves, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. His health bar hovered dangerously in the orange zone. HP, 340-1250 status, bleeding, healing reduced. Come out, little mouse, Silas called out. His voice was melodic, echoing through the vast library like a song. The master is waiting. Why delay the inevitable? Izuku grit his teeth. He popped the cork on a high-grade health potion and downed it. The liquid tasted like chalk and mint. His HP ticked up, but the wound on his ribs, a shallow gash from the lancer's spear, refused to close completely. He's too fast, Izuku analyzed, his mind racing faster than his heart. Bahadur has defense. Saira has firepower. I have tricks. He peeked around the corner. Silas was walking casually down the center aisle. He didn't look like a warrior in the middle of a death match. He looked like a bored aristocrat. His spear, a long, twisted lance of black metal, hummed with a purple aura that distorted the air around it. Entity, Silas, the cursed puppet, trait, infinite stamina. You rely on potions, Silas sighed, stabbing his spear into a bookshelf. The wood exploded, sending paper flying like confetti. A coward's tool. You lack the honor of the paladin or the fire of the samurai. Honor gets you killed, Izuku whispered to himself. He summoned his scythe, Reaper's best friend. He didn't charge. Instead, he raised his left hand, aiming at the ceiling pillars. Magic web. Thin, translucent threads shot from his fingertips. They were almost invisible in the dim light of the library. He wasn't aiming for Silas. He was aiming for the environment. Snap. Silas appeared in front of him. There was no sound of movement. 1 second, he was 30 feet away. The next, the tip of his spear was inches from Izuku's eye. Found you. Izuku didn't dodge. He used Shadow Step, teleporting 10 feet backward. The spear grazed his cheek, drawing a fresh line of blood. Running again? Silas scoffed. He spun the spear, deflecting Izuku's counterswing with contemptuous ease. Is this the power of the so-called Grim Reaper? To flee? I'm not fleeing, Izuku panted, casting another web line to the floor as he landed. I'm setting the table. Table? Silas tilted his head. For what? Your funeral? He charged again. A flurry of moves. Izuku danced backward. He parried, ducked, and weaved. Every movement was calculated not to hit Silas, but to lure him deeper into the central aisle of the library. Left. Web. Right. Web. Jump. Web. Izuku was burning mana at a terrifying rate. He drank a mana potion midair, barely avoiding a strike that would have taken his legs off. Boring, Silas yawned. I expected more from the one guarding Lady Alice. He moved his hand forward. The dark crystal in his chest pulsed. Art, void lunge. The spear extended, shooting forward like a railgun bolt. It caught Izuku in the shoulder, pinning him to the back wall. Arg! Izuku screamed, dropping his scythe. And now, it ends, Silas said, walking slowly toward the pinned boy. Do not worry. I will make it quick. Then I will go upstairs and kill the woman I swore to protect. Such is the tragedy of my existence. He raised the spear for the killing blow. Izuku looked up. Pain clouded his vision, but his eyes were clear. He looked at the room behind Silas. It looked empty to the naked eye. But to Izuku, who could see his own skill constructs, the central aisle was a complex lattice of hundreds of mana threads. "You're right," Izuku wheezed, grabbing the spear pin through his shoulder. "It ends now." He reached into his inventory. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a flask of industrial oil and a fire stone. Silas paused. "What are you?" Izuku smashed the oil flask against the web line nearest to him. The liquid coated the thread, traveling instantly across the network he had spent 20 minutes weaving. Then, he crushed the fire stone. Imbue, ignite. Whoosh. The library didn't just catch fire. The air itself seemed to scream. The magic web didn't burn away. The threads were made of mana, reinforced by Izuku's high intelligence stat. Instead, the oil coating them ignited, turning the invisible threads into searing, white-hot wires of plasma. The web contracted. Silas, standing in the center of the trap, didn't have time to react. The wires tightened around him. Zzzt. Wah. Silas tried to raise his spear, but a wire caught his wrist. It sliced through the armor, the skin, and the bone like a laser through butter. His hand fell to the floor. "My hand?" Silas stared at the stump. "Regeneration. Why isn't it?" "Heat cauterizes," Izuku said, ripping the spear from his own shoulder with a grunt of agony. He dropped to the floor, blood pouring down his arm. "You can't heal if the wound is sealed instantly." The web tightened further. Silas screamed. It wasn't a scream of anger. It was a scream of confusion. The wires cut into his legs, his torso, his neck. He was trapped in a cage of fire. "I am the Lancer." Silas gasped, falling to his knees as his tendons were severed. Izuku walked forward. He picked up his scythe. He didn't look triumphant. He looked exhausted. "You were a puppet," Izuku said softly. "Now, you're free." He swung. The blade passed through the wires which recognized their master and took Silas's head. Entity defeated, Silas level up. Level up. The body of the general dissolved into ash, leaving only the dark crystal that had replaced his heart. It cracked and shattered. Izuku slumped against a bookshelf. He wanted to help Alice. He wanted to run up the stairs. But his body felt like lead. Boom. The entire tower shook violently. Izuku looked down through a gap in the floorboards. Far below, on the first floor, a massive pillar of golden light pierced the darkness, shooting straight up through the center of the tower, bypassing the floors and vanishing into the sky. "Bahadur." Izuku smiled weakly. "Show off." It meant the paladin had won. It meant they were all fighting at the same time, pushing their limits together. "Good luck, Alice," Izuku whispered. His eyes rolled back, and the darkness took him. Alice stepped onto the open-air platform. The wind howled around her, whipping her white hair into a frenzy. In the center sat a throne made of fused bones. And sitting on it was a man. He looked like Silas, but older. More regal. He wore a high-collared cloak of red velvet and swirled a glass of wine in one hand. "Alice," Dracula smiled. It was a charming smile. The smile of a man who truly believed he was the hero of his own story. "You look well. The stasis kept you young." "You look tired," Alice countered, walking toward him. She didn't summon a weapon. She didn't raise a guard. 500 years of playing king. Has it been worth it? Dracula stood up. He spread his arms. "Look around you. I built a kingdom. I brought order to the chaos. Humans fear the night again. We are no longer rats hiding in the dark. We are gods." "You are a parasite," Alice said coldly. "You built this kingdom on my blood. You enslaved our friends. You killed the valley. I did what you were too weak to do." Dracula roared, his composure cracking. "I seized destiny. I made us strong." He threw his wine glass aside. It shattered. "And now, you return. To what? Scold me? You are weak, Alice. You haven't fed in centuries. I have feasted on the world." He blurred. He appeared in front of Alice, his hand raised to backhand her. "I am the Lord of." Alice caught his wrist. There was no shockwave this time. No explosion. Just a dead stop. Dracula's eyes went wide. He tried to pull away, but he couldn't. Her grip was absolute. "You are nothing," Alice whispered. Her eyes began to glow. Not red. White. "You drank my blood, Nicholas. You built your power on my foundation. Did you never stop to think?" She squeezed. Crack. Dracula screamed as his wrist shattered. That the blood remembers who it belongs to." Dracula fell to his knees. He clutched his chest. The veins in his neck bulged, turning black. What are you doing?" he gagged. "My power. It's draining." "It was never yours," Alice said. She placed a hand on his forehead. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked infinitely sad. I loved you, Nicholas. As a brother. A companion. But you died 500 years ago. This thing standing before me is just a bad dream. Alice, please. Dracula begged, his skin beginning to wither. He looked old now. Ancient. We can rule together. I can give you the world. I don't want the world, Alice said. I just want my family back. She ripped her hand away. A stream of red energy, thick, potent mana tore out of Dracula's body. He screamed as his essence was forcibly extracted. His skin turned to dust. His bones crumbled. Touché. Progenitor. With a final, rattling breath, the Lord of Vampires dissolved. There was no body left. Just a pile of ash on the throne he had coveted so dearly. Alice stood alone on the platform. The red energy swirled around her, a vortex of raw power. It's too much, she whispered. Her voice sounded distorted. The power. Silas, Alastair, Lilith, Nicholas. It's all coming back. I can't contain it. Her body began to crack. Beams of light shot out from her skin. I have to change. I have to adapt. The red energy solidified. It wrapped around her, layer by layer, forming a cocoon. Within seconds, Alice was gone. In her place, hovering above the ash of the throne, was a pitch-black sphere the size of a car. It pulsed with a heartbeat that shook the tower. Bahadur opened his eyes. He was lying on the first floor. The marble around him was scorched black from his sunbreaker attack. His body ached, but the paralysis from Lilith's poison was gone. He sat up, checking his hands. A faint golden glow lingered under his skin. Divinity, Bahadur muttered. It speeds the healing. He stood up, using his sword as a crutch. The tower was silent. The tremors had stopped. Izuku. Syra. He began the climb. On the second floor, he found the arena of flesh. The room was hot, the air smelling of ozone and burnt meat. In the center of the pit lay Commander Syra. She was unconscious, her armor gone, clutching her side. Bahadur knelt beside her. She was breathing. Rest, warrior, he whispered. He lifted her gently, carrying her over his shoulder. He continued to the third floor. The library was a wreck. Books were scattered everywhere, and scorch marks lined the floor in a strange, web-like pattern. He found Izuku slumped against a bookshelf, his shoulder bandaged crudely with a strip of cloth from his coat. Izuku, Bahadur said softly. He shifted Syra to one arm and lifted Izuku with the other. The boy was light. Too light for the burden he carried. Bahadur carried them both up the final flight of stairs. The fourth floor was empty, save for a pile of ash where a throne used to be, and a massive black orb hovering in the center. Alice? Bahadur asked the silent sphere. It pulsed in response, a low thrum that vibrated in his teeth. He set Izuku and Syra down on some of the velvet cushions that had survived the battle. He sat down between them, sword across his knees, and waited. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time in the dungeon was fluid. Ugh. Izuku groaned, his eyes fluttering open. He tried to sit up, wincing as his shoulder protested. Easy, Bahadur said. You took a spear through the rotator cuff. Bahadur. Izuku blinked, his vision clearing. He saw Syra stirring next to him. You're alive. Hard to kill a paladin, Bahadur smiled. And Syra is tough. She will live. Where is? Izuku looked around. His eyes landed on the black orb. Is that Alice? I believe so, Bahadur said. It has been pulsing like a heartbeat since I arrived. Syra sat up, coughing. Did we win? Dracula is ash, Bahadur confirmed, pointing to the pile of dust. Good, Syra muttered, leaning back against a pillar. Good riddance. As if waiting for an audience, the black orb began to shake violently. Cracks appeared on the surface. Beams of pure white light shot out, blinding them. Crack. The shell shattered. The light faded, revealing a figure standing in the center of the platform. It was Alice. But she was different. She looked human. Her skin wasn't the pale, dead white of a vampire anymore. It had a healthy, rosy flush. Her eyes were no longer blood red, they were a soft, vibrant crimson. She looked older, perhaps in her late teens, matching the physical age of her original transformation. She looked at her hands. She touched her face. She took a deep breath of air. I'm warm, she whispered. She looked at them. Why are you looking at me like that? Alice asked, tilting her head. Did I do something? You look. Izuku started. Observe. Entity, Alice race, progenitor, awakened, status, alive. I remember, Alice said suddenly, her eyes widening. The evolution. The power required a vessel that could grow. So. It made me alive. She bowed low to them. I am sorry I could not help you on the lower floors. But, thank you for freeing me. Dungeon cleared. Quest complete, The Vampire War Reward 1, Title, Vampire Slayer Reward 2, 100,000 points Reward 3, S-Rank Loot Box X2. Izuku dismissed the notifications. He looked at his inventory. 2 S-Rank invitations. He looked at Syra, who was staring at Alice with a complicated expression. He looked at Alice, who was marveling at her own pulse. I need to tell you all something, Izuku said, his voice serious. He glanced at Bahadur, who nodded in understanding. Bahadur and I, we aren't from this world. We aren't amnesiacs. Syra's eyes narrowed instantly. Excuse me? I come from a different world, Izuku explained, gesturing vaguely. A world without enchantments. And Bahadur is a hero I brought with me. The reason we're here. The reason we fought. It's complicated. But I have the power to leave. To go home. He held up the 2 gold cards. And these invitations let me take others with me. Alice looked at the cards, then back at the ash pile that was once her companion. You mean? Leave this world entirely? Yes, Izuku said. Alice, your world here is broken. Your friends are gone. But in my world, you can start over. A clean slate. Alice smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile. I have nothing left here. Take me with you. Izuku turned to the commander. What about you, Syra? Syra looked at the horizon of her dead world. She looked at her broken sword. She stayed silent for a long time. I'm going with you, Syra finally said. Why? Izuku asked, surprised she agreed so quickly. You're a commander. You have a home here. You have the syndicate. Syra let out a bitter laugh. The pure syndicate. It isn't as pure as the name suggests, Izuku. I was raised as a weapon. If I go back, they'll just point me at the next enemy. Or worse, they'll lock me away until they need me again. I'm tired of fighting their wars. She met his gaze. If your world offers freedom, then I'm in. Izuku grinned. Invite, Syra. Invite, Alice. The world dissolved into light. The hideout of the Black Cross was usually quiet, save for the hum of the ventilation and the occasional rattle of pipes. It was a stark, industrial space, a repurposed warehouse district basement that Kurojairi had secured for them. It lacked the gothic grandeur of Dracula's tower or the sterile evil of the doctor's lab. It was mundane. And for a group of otherworldly refugees, mundane was the hardest difficulty setting of all. Izuku sat on the worn leather couch, watching his team blend in. In the corner where a skylight let in a patch of natural sun, Bahadur was humming to himself. The former paladin, who had once cleaved mountains with holy light, was currently wearing a floral apron over his tactical gear. He was tending to a row of potted plants he had lined up against the brick wall. You're overwatering the hydrangeas, Izuku noted, not looking up from his notebook. They are thirsty, Bahadur replied casually, snipping a dead leaf with a level of precision usually reserved for decapitations. And the soil here is terrible. No mana in the earth. Just pollution and worms. But hey, life finds a way, right? On the other side of the room, Syra was hunched over a triple monitor setup Izuku had bought from the system shop. Her eyes were glued to a scrolling feed of hero forums and news sites. Unbelievable, Syra muttered, typing furiously. This MT lady hero caused 3 million yen in property damage to stop a purse snatcher. In the syndicate, she would have been court-martialed for reckless endangerment. Here, she gets a fan club. It's about branding, Izuku said. Heroes are celebrities first, soldiers second. It's inefficient, Syra grumbled, taking a sip of energy drink. But the internet. This streaming concept. It has tactical potential. Psychological warfare via chat rooms. I like it. And then there was Alice. The progenitor of vampires was currently curled up in an armchair, wrapped in a blanket like a burrito. She was staring intently at a tablet screen, tears streaming down her face. Why? Alice sniffled. Why did he have to die? He promised her he would return. It's a fictional drama, Alice, Izuku sighed. The writers needed emotional stakes. It is cruel. Alice shouted, her eyes flashing red for a second. I have lived for 500 years, and I have never seen such betrayal. Season 2 better fix this or I will find the author and kill them. Izuku closed his notebook. It had been a month since they returned from the C-rank dungeon. A month of downtime. A month of integrating 3 people who didn't exist in this world's databases into modern society. The door to the main bar area opened. Kurojairi stepped in, wiping a glass as he walked. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Bahadur put down the watering can. Syra paused her typing. Alice paused her show. Master Izuku, Kurojairi said, his voice smooth and polite. A message from Sensei. Izuku stood up. Is he displeased? On the contrary. He is amused by your progress, Kurogiri said. However, he believes you are becoming complacent. The League of Villains Tamura's group is preparing for a move. Sensei wishes to see if the Black Cross is merely a group of powerful refugees, or if you are a legitimate organization. A test, Izuku deduced. A debut, Kurogiri corrected. He wants you to make a splash. Tamura destroys. Sensei wants to see if you can control. Izuku looked at his team. They were bored. They were restless. They were powerful entities trapped in a mundane waiting room. We need resources, Izuku said, turning to them. We need a base that isn't borrowed. We need money. And we need the world to know we exist. So, Syra spun her chair around, a feral grin returning to her face. Who are we killing? No killing, Kurogiri said. You're going to rob a bank. 10 minutes later, the table was covered in blueprints of the Kiyoshi Ward Central Bank. A bank heist? Alice asked, looking at the layout with skepticism. It seems petty. Like something a common bandit would do. It's a classic for a reason, Izuku explained, pointing to the security grid. It draws attention. Police first. Then low-tier heroes. Then high-tier heroes. It allows us to control the escalation. And the money? Bahadur asked. Do we need paper currency? The system shop is expensive, Izuku admitted. 100,000 points got us all this stuff, but I'm broke again. Real-world money can buy materials, tech, and influence. We can't rely on the system for everything. Fine, Syra said. I'm in. I haven't burned anything in weeks. About that, Izuku said, his expression hardening. We need to talk about cover stories. This world tracks abilities. If you go out there using light magic, enchantments, and blood arts, the Hero Public Safety Commission will realize you aren't human. They'll hunt us down as unknown threats rather than villains. We need to fit the mold, Bahadur realized. We need quirks, da. Izuku nodded. Exactly. We need to limit our abilities to mimic specific quirks. 1 power per person. No switching. He looked at Bahadur. Bahadur. You use light magic. Can you restrict it to solid constructs? Bahadur summoned a small dagger of hard light in his hand. Hard light constructs. It is simple, but effective. I can play the role of a barrier or weapon maker. Good, Izuku wrote it down. Syra? Fire, Syra said immediately, lighting a small flame on her finger. Pyrokinesis. It's common, destructive, and fits my temper. Alice? Alice frowned. I do not have magic like them. I have biology. Super strength, Izuku suggested. Enhancement. You're fast, strong, and durable. Just don't drink anyone's blood on camera. How boring, Alice pouted. But very well. Physical enhancement it is. The room went silent. 3 pairs of eyes turned to Izuku. And you, King? Syra asked, leaning forward. What's your quirk? You use shadows, scythes, inventory space, and whatever that system thing is. You're the most suspicious one here. Izuku froze. His hand tightened around the pen until the plastic creaked. Izuku started, then stopped. Is it a secret? Alice asked, tilting her head. We are a team, Izuku. We shared our pasts in the tower. Why do you hesitate? Izuku looked down at the blueprints. He thought about the fire that burned his skin when he was 6. He thought about the telekinesis that threw plates at his head. He thought about his siblings Yuki, Kenzo, Daiki. Kenzo had been born with both lightning and ice. Daiki crackled with raw electricity, while Yuki controlled ice. They were the perfect combination of their parents' powerful genes. They were praised for it. They hurt him with it. To use those powers. To mimic them. Felt like admitting he was part of that bloodline. It's not important, Izuku snapped, standing up abruptly. I need to scout the location. Study the blueprints. We move in 3 days. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Touchy, Syra noted. He is hiding something, Alice said, her eyes narrowing. And I do not like secrets. At the Kiyoshi Ward shopping district, the sun was bright, reflecting off the glass storefronts of the shopping district. It was a stark contrast to the gloom of the hideout. Izuku walked through the crowd, his hood up, hands in his pockets. He wasn't looking at the clothes or the food. His eyes were scanning the perimeter of the bank across the street. 3 guard patrols. Cameras on the corners. Heroes in the area, Death Arms and Kamui Woods. He was analyzing response times, escape routes, and civilian density. His face was a mask of intense, brooding concentration. You're glaring really hard at that building. Did it offend you? Izuku flinched, his danger sense barely registering the approach because there was no malice. He turned. Standing next to him, invading his personal space, was a girl. She looked to be about 16 or 17, a year or two older than him. She had periwinkle hair that twisted down to her knees and wide, curious blue eyes. She was wearing a UA high school uniform. UA student, Izuku's mind flashed a warning. Enemy. I'm busy, Izuku said, turning to walk away. Busy doing what? The girl followed him, matching his pace effortlessly. She floated slightly off the ground, spiraling around him like a curious fairy. You look like you're trying to calculate the structural integrity of the concrete with your mind. Are you a math genius? Or maybe you're just really brooding. Go away, Izuku muttered, pulling his hood lower. I'm Nijire, she announced, ignoring his dismissal entirely. Nijire Hado. I'm a second year at UA. What's your name? Why do you have so many scars on your hands? Is that a fashion statement? Or do you fight people? Izuku stopped. She was relentless. And loud. People were starting to look. Attention was the last thing he needed right now. If I answer, will you leave me alone? Izuku asked. Maybe, Nijire beamed. But probably not. I'm very curious. She grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Come on. You look like you haven't eaten in a week. Let's get ice cream. My treat. I don't want ice cream. Izuku found himself being dragged. He could have broken her grip. He could have used Shadow Step. But causing a scene with a UA student in the middle of a crowded street would blow the operation before it began. Just endure it, he told himself. Blend in. 20 minutes later, Izuku sat on a park bench, holding a melting cone of vanilla ice cream. Nijire sat next to him, happily swinging her legs. So, Nijire said, liking her spoon. You never told me your name. Izuku, he muttered. Just Izuku? Mysterious, Nijire giggled. Then, her expression shifted. The bubbly airhead facade dropped for a fraction of a second, revealing a sharp, perceptive intelligence. You have really sad eyes, Izuku. Like you're carrying a mountain. Izuku stared at his ice cream. I have a lot on my mind. Like what? Like power, Izuku admitted. He didn't know why he was talking to her. Maybe it was because she was a stranger. Maybe it was because he had no one else to vent to about this specific problem. I have to make a choice. To use a power that belongs to people I hate. People who hurt me. He clenched his free hand. If I use it, I feel like I'm becoming them. Like I'm admitting I'm their son. But if I don't use it, I can't do what I need to do. Nijire hummed, looking up at the clouds. That sounds tough, she said. But isn't power just power? Izuku looked at her. What? I mean, my quirk uses my own vitality, Nijire explained, tapping her cheek. It makes me tired. It uses my energy. Sometimes I hate it because it limits me. But it's mine. Once it leaves my body, it doesn't matter where it came from. It matters what I do with it. She turned to him, her blue eyes piercing. If you take that power and use it for your goals, then isn't it yours? You're stealing it from them. You're making it your own. That sounds like a victory to me. Izuku blinked. Stealing it. He thought about the system. The system was about taking. Taking souls. Taking experience. Taking loot. If he used the ice and lightning. Not as a gift from his family, but as a weapon he stole from their genetics. A victory, Izuku whispered. A slow, dark smile spread across his face. Yeah. I like that. He stood up. The ice cream was dripping onto his hand, but he didn't care. Thanks, Nijire. You really helped me. Nijire blinked, surprised by the sudden shift in his aura. The depressed boy was gone. In his place was something sharper. Oh, you're welcome. She smiled brightly. Does this mean we're friends? Can I have your number? Maybe next time, Izuku said. He tossed the ice cream into a bin. I have to go to work. He walked away, his stride purposeful. Nijire watched him go, a small frown creasing her forehead. Work? After some time, Izuku walked back into the main room. The team looked up. You're back, Alice said, still wrapped in her blanket. Did you finish your brooding? I did, Izuku said. He walked over to the table where the heist plans were laid out. He picked up a marker and wrote a name next to his own. My fake quirk, Izuku announced, his voice steady. Is Storm. Bahadur raised an eyebrow. Storm? Manipulation of ice and electricity, Izuku clarified. It's versatile, destructive, and flashy enough to draw attention away from my real skills. Alice looked at him. She sensed the shift in him. The hesitation was gone. Ice and lightning, she mused. A volatile combination. It suits you, King. Izuku looked at the chess pieces scattered on the table. He picked up the king piece. We debut tomorrow, Izuku said. Get your cloaks. We have a bank to rob. Bahadur stood up, cracking his neck. Finally. Syra cracked a grin. Mission updated, the Black Cross debut objective, secure the funds. Establish notoriety. Time remaining, 14 hours. The air in the repurposed warehouse was stagnant, heavy with the smell of rusted iron, old concrete, and the electric buzz of anticipation. Dust motes danced in the single beam of sunlight cutting through the high windows, illuminating the makeshift war room Izuku had established. On the central table, which was little more than a slab of wood on sawhorses, lay 4 neat piles of folded fabric. Kurogyri had outdone himself given the short notice. The uniforms weren't just costumes for a play, they were high-grade tactical gear disguised as theatrical villainy. Suit up, Izuku ordered, his voice echoing slightly in the large space. He reached for the pile marked with a golden crown emblem. He shook out the fabric. It was a heavy, high-collared cloak made of a material that seemed to drink the light around it, shifting between black and midnight blue. On the back, embroidered in dark gray thread that shimmered only when the light hit it just right, was the symbol of the king chess piece. He fastened the clasp at his throat. The weight of it settled on his shoulders like a physical mantle of command. It was suffocating, in a way. He wasn't just hiding his identity, he was stepping into a role that would make him a target for every hero in Japan. He pulled the hood up, casting his face in shadow, and secured the red half-mask over his eyes. It clicked into place, the HUD inside flaring to life, syncing with his system interface. Knights, Izuku said, sliding 2 piles toward Bahadur and Syra. Syra picked hers up, running a finger over the crimson trim. The back bore the stylized horse head of the knight. It's light, she noted, testing the fabric's tensile strength with a sharp tug. Reinforced weave, but flexible. Good mobility. I can fight in this without burning it off my own body. Bahadur donned his, trimmed in silver thread. He wore it over his modern tactical vest and cargo pants, having ditched the heavy plate armor years ago for ease of movement. He zipped it up, checking the fit around his shoulders. A knight, huh? Fitting. Though honestly, these hidden pockets are a lifesaver compared to my old gear. I can actually carry snacks. And then there was Alice. She looked at the remaining pile. It was marked with the rook symbol, the castle tower. A rook? Alice asked, raising a perfectly manicured eyebrow. She looked from the cloak to Izuku, her expression unimpressed. I am a queen, Izuku. I ruled a kingdom while your ancestors were still figuring out agriculture. Why am I the castle? Because you're the stronghold, Izuku explained, tightening the straps on his combat boots. You're the indestructible force that anchors the team. You hold the line. Besides. He gestured to the final hook on the far wall. Hanging there, untouched and pristine, was a white cloak embroidered with the queen symbol. The queen's spot is empty, Alice noted, her voice dropping. She looked at the white fabric with a strange mixture of longing and curiosity. We haven't found her yet, Izuku said, staring at the empty cloak. He thought of the file sitting in his inventory, the picture of a girl with periwinkle hair and a sharp mind. But we will. For now, take the rook. Alice huffed, a sound of regal annoyance, but she picked up the cloak. She pulled it over her head. It was a disaster. The fabric swallowed her whole. The hem dragged a good foot on the floor, pooling around her bare feet. The sleeves hung past her hands like a child playing dress-up in her father's oversized wardrobe. The hood fell forward, completely blinding her. It doesn't fit, Alice whispered. Her voice trembled with genuine devastation, more emotion than she had shown when discussing the fall of her empire. She held up her arms, the fabric drooping sadly. I look ridiculous. Like a ghost in a bedsheet. Is this how you humiliate the progenitor? Syra snorted, turning away to hide a grin, her shoulders shaking. Intimidating. Truly. The heroes will tremble before the laundry ghost. Shut up! Alice snapped. The air around her rippled with a sudden spike of pressure, cracking the concrete floor beneath her feet. It is not funny. I finally get a uniform and... A soft, digital sound resonated from the cloak. Only Izuku saw the notification pop up in his vision. Item, Adaptive Weave Cloak Effect, Auto-Sizing Active. The fabric began to ripple. It wasn't magic, it was advanced support tech woven with fibers Izuku had bought from the system store. The material shrank, the fibers contracting and reknitting themselves in real time. The hem lifted until it brushed her ankles perfectly. The waist tightened to accentuate her form. The hood adjusted, pulling back just enough to frame her face while keeping her eyes shadowed. Alice gasped. She spun around, the cloak flaring out elegantly behind her. She ran to the full-length mirror Izuku had set up in the corner. It fits? Alice squealed, doing another twirl, admiring how the rook symbol shimmered on her back. Look! It knows my size. It's perfect. Izuku couldn't help the small smile that tugged at the corner of his mouth beneath the mask. For a progenitor vampire who had slaughtered armies and lived for 5 centuries, she was surprisingly easy to please with modern conveniences. Focus, Izuku said, letting his smile fade into the neutral mask of the king. Playtime is over. Once we step out that door, the game begins. We are not a necromancer, a paladin, a commander, and a vampire. We are a villain organization. We are Quirk users. He looked at each of them, his eyes serious, drilling the plan into their heads one last time. Bahadur. Hard light. You create barriers and weapons. No healing magic. No talking about divine will or the gods. Just keep it simple. You generate photons and solidify them. Got it, Bahadur said, leaning against the table and crossing his arms. I make walls, I hit people with light sticks. Simple physics. No religion. Syra. Fire. You are a pyrokinesis user. No sun armor. No bloodline talk. You generate heat from your skin. That's it. Understood, Syra said, testing a small flame on her fingertip. I burn things. Business as usual. Alice. Enhancement. You have super strength and durability. Do not drink anyone's blood. Do not turn into mist. Do not use your killing intent to paralyze people. How boring, Alice pouted, adjusting her hood. But very well. I shall simply smash things. And I. Izuku summoned a small spark of blue electricity in his left hand and a frost crystal in his right. The contrasting elements danced across his palm. M the storm. He checked the system timer ticking down in the corner of his vision. Mission, the Black Cross debut objective, secure the funds. Establish notoriety. Time remaining, 30 minutes. Let's go, Izuku said, turning toward the exit. It's showtime. Kiyoshi Ward Central Bank. The bank was a monument to capitalism, all glass, marble, and polished brass. It was a Friday afternoon, the busiest time of the week. The lobby was filled with civilians, people depositing paychecks, business owners withdrawing cash for the weekend, families opening savings accounts. The air conditioning hummed, masking the low murmur of conversation and the riffling of bills. Security guards stood by the doors, looking bored, chatting idly about the weather forecast for the weekend. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh. 4 figures walked in. They didn't run. They didn't scream. They moved with the synchronized precision of a military unit. They walked in a V formation. Izuku took point, the apex of the spear. Bahadur and Syra flanked him. Alice walked the rear, guarding their 6. The lobby went quiet. It wasn't the silence of fear yet, it was the silence of confusion. People stared at the high-quality cloaks, the stylized masks, the sheer theatricality of the entrance. Is that a cosplay group? Someone whispered near the teller line, holding up their phone. Are they filming something? Maybe it's a promo for a new movie? Izuku stopped in the exact center of the lobby. He didn't look at the people. He raised his hand toward the massive crystal chandelier hanging 20 feet above them. Skill, lightning bolt, low output. Crack boom. A jagged bolt of blue lightning, thick as a man's arm, shot from his hand. It struck the chain holding the chandelier with pinpoint accuracy. The metal melted instantly. The massive fixture plummeted, smashing into the center of the marble floor in an explosion of glass, crystal, and dust. The screaming started instantly. Everyone down. Syra shouted, stepping forward. She didn't cast a spell, she simply snapped her fingers. A wall of orange fire erupted in front of the teller counters, a roaring barrier separating the staff from the silent alarms. Hands where we can see them. Nobody plays a hero, nobody gets burned. Crowd control, Izuku ordered calmly, his voice distorted by the mask. Bahadur stepped to the main entrance. He waved his hand in a sweeping motion. Barrier. He shaped his raw mana into solid walls, mimicking a quirk. Sheets of translucent, golden light slammed down over the glass doors and windows, sealing the building airtight. The light hummed with energy, solid as steel. All right, folks, listen up. Bahadur called out, his voice projecting easily over the panic. He sounded less like a knight and more like a seasoned SWAT team leader. We aren't here to hurt anyone. We're just here for the government's insured money. You sit tight, keep your hands visible, and you'll be home for dinner. Deal? Most robbers screamed threats and waved guns. Bahadur gave polite instructions. The civilians, confused by the lack of aggression and the professional demeanor, obeyed instantly, dropping to the floor. Rook, the vault, Izuku said, turning to Alice. Alice walked toward the massive steel vault door behind the teller line. 2 security guards, shaking in their boots, pointed their tasers at her. Stay back, one yelled, his voice cracking. This is restricted access. Alice didn't even slow down. She reached out, moving faster than they could react, and grabbed the barrels of the tasers. She crushed them like soda cans in her bare hands, letting the plastic shards fall to the floor. The guard stared at her, terrified. She reached the vault door, a circular slab of reinforced steel 3 feet thick, designed to withstand explosions. "Open sesame," she muttered. She didn't use a code. She didn't use a drill. She pulled back her fist and punched it. Boom. The impact shook the entire building like an earthquake. The steel buckled inward, screeching in protest as the heavy hinges were torn from the concrete frame. With a grunt of effort, Alice dug her fingers into the dented metal, ripped the door off, and tossed it aside as if it were made of cardboard. It crashed into the wall, embedding itself in the plaster. "Rook takes pawn," Alice smirked beneath her mask. "Load the bags," Izuku commanded, checking the timer. 2 minutes. The roof. Shota Aizawa, the pro-hero eraser head, landed silently on the roof of the bank. He adjusted his capture weapon around his neck, his tired eyes narrowing as he surveyed the scene below through a skylight. Police perimeter established. No entry. Barriers blocking the windows. Hard light Quirk? He moved to the ventilation unit. He prized the grate open with a practiced motion and slipped inside, moving through the ducts like a spider. He dropped into the main lobby, landing silently on top of a filing cabinet in the shadows of the high ceiling. He assessed the threats instantly. 4 villains. 1 electric ice type, Leader King. 1 fire type, Knight. 1 strength type, Rook. 1 barrier type, Knight. Coordinated. Dangerous. They aren't hurting the civilians. He needed to take out the crowd control first. If the barriers dropped, the police could storm in. He locked his eyes on Bahadur, who was standing by the door, back turned. Erasure. His black hair floated up, defying gravity. His eyes glowed red. Bahadur paused. He scratched his neck. Weird. Skin feels tingly. The barriers didn't flicker. They remained solid, humming with golden light. Aizawa frowned, confusion spiking in his gut. What? I'm looking right at him. Why isn't his quirk erasing? Is it a mutant type? No, the light is clearly emitted. Is he generating it from a support item? He shifted his gaze to Syra, who was maintaining the firewall near the tellers. Erasure. The fire roared on, unaffected. A cold sweat broke out on Aizawa's neck. 2 failures? That's impossible. Unless. Intruder. Izuku shouted. His danger sense had pinged violently. He spun around, looking up into the rafters, spotting the floating hair and the glowing red eyes in the shadows. Up top. Eraser head. Aizawa didn't hesitate. He launched his capture scarf, the white tape shooting out like a viper, aiming to bind Syra. Code black. Izuku screamed. It was the signal. Pretend the quirks are gone. Syra reacted instantly. She cut the flow of mana to her sword. The firewall vanished instantly. My fire, she shouted, feigning panic, her acting surprisingly convincing. He erased it. Physical combat only. Bahadur yelled, drawing his steel sword from beneath his cloak. He shut down the magic. Aizawa landed in a crouch, retracting his scarf. Okay, it worked on the fire girl. Maybe the light guy is just immune? Or maybe I blinked. Or maybe it's a dual-type quirk. He didn't have time to think. Bahadur was on him. The former paladin moved with terrifying speed. He swung the flat of his blade, aiming to incapacitate rather than kill. Aizawa ducked under the swing, sweeping Bahadur's legs. Bahadur hopped over the sweep with uncanny agility, countering with a shield bash using his bare forearm. Clang! Aizawa's capture weapon wrapped around Bahadur's arm, but when he tried to throw the villain, Bahadur didn't budge. He was rooted to the spot, strong as an ox. Man, you are annoying, Bahadur grunted, twisting his arm to throw Aizawa off balance. Ice wall! Izuku shouted. He slammed his hand on the ground. A jagged glacier erupted from the floor, separating Aizawa from Bahadur and blocking the hero's line of sight. Skill, ice construct, wall. We're leaving. Izuku ordered. Rook, the floor. On it. Alice grabbed a duffel bag of cash in one hand. With the other, she slammed her fist into the marble floor. Crack. The ground shattered. The impact was precise, collapsing the floor into the subway maintenance tunnels running beneath the bank. Dust billowed up. Retreat. Not so fast. Aizawa jumped over the ice wall, his eyes locking on Izuku. Erasure. Izuku felt the familiar tingling sensation described in the hero forums. It felt like static on his skin. But his system didn't even glitch. His skills were admin privileges, not biological functions. Erasure couldn't touch him. But he had to sell it. My quirks. Izuku gasped, clutching his chest and dropping to one knee. He got me. He rolled backward, dropping into the hole Alice had made. Now, Knight. Syra grabbed a smoke grenade from her belt bought from the system shop for 500 points and threw it. Hiss. Thick, gray, military-grade smoke filled the lobby, obscuring Aizawa's line of sight and choking the air. DMN it, Aizawa cursed, blinking to clear his dry eyes as the villains vanished into the floor. The tunnels. The team landed in the dark, damp maintenance tunnel. Rats scurried away into the shadows. That was close, Syra breathed, sheathing her sword. That hero. His glare felt weird. Like he was trying to cut me off from my mana. Erase her head, Izuku said, getting to his feet and sprinting down the tracks. He cancels quirks. If he realized he couldn't cancel yours, he'd know you aren't human. Good acting back there. I am a natural thespian, Syra grinned beneath her mask. We need to move, Bahadur urged, checking behind them with his sword drawn. The police will be swarming the vents. Boom. The ceiling of the tunnel exploded. It wasn't a controlled demolition like Alice's. It was brute force. Debris rained down. Dust choked the air. A shockwave knocked them all off their feet. A massive figure landed in front of them, blocking the path. He stood 7 feet tall, rippling with muscle, wearing a costume of red, white, and blue. His smile was blinding, even in the dark, damp tunnel. I am here. All Might boomed, his voice shaking the very foundations of the earth. To return that which was stolen. The pressure was immense. It wasn't killing intent like Alice's. It was the sheer, overwhelming weight of justice. It felt like standing under a falling mountain. Izuku froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. Observe. Entity, Toshinori Yagi, All Might, level? Status, the symbol of peace warning, threat level, extreme. Flee immediately. Izuku was level even with all his grinding, all his suffering, he was an ant compared to this sun. Surrender, villains. All Might said, raising a fist. And no one gets hurt. Move. Izuku screamed, his voice cracking. He didn't try to attack. He used his strongest defensive skill. Glacial Fortress. A massive dome of ice, reinforced with dark mana, erupted around them. It was thick enough to stop a tank shell. It was the strongest barrier Izuku could create. All Might didn't even wind up. He just flicked his wrist. Texas Smash. The wind pressure alone shattered the ice dome into a million sparkling diamonds. The force blew Izuku backward, smashing him into the tunnel wall. King! Alice shouted. She dropped the money bag and charged All Might. Rook, no! Izuku yelled, reaching out. Alice threw a punch with her full progenitor strength, a blow that had cracked the Tower of Night. A blow that could level a building. All Might caught it. With one hand. He didn't even slide back. Strong, All Might noted, his smile never wavering, though a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. But not strong enough, young lady. He twisted his hip and threw her. Alice flew down the tunnel like a ragdoll, skipping off the water like a stone until she crashed into a pile of rubble. Knights! Smoke and mirrors. Izuku ordered, scrambling to his feet, ignoring the pain in his back. Syra unleashed a torrent of fire, aiming not at All Might, but at the standing water on the tunnel floor. Flash steam. The tunnel was instantly filled with blinding, scalding steam. Visibility dropped to 0. Bahadur raised his hands, sweat pouring down his face. Hard light, prism wall. He created a dozen layered barriers between them and the hero. Run. Go, go, go. Bahadur yelled, grabbing Izuku's shoulder and hauling him toward the exit ladder. They sprinted into the steam. Behind them, they heard the sound of glass breaking as All Might punched through the barriers one by one. Smash. 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 He was coming. And he was fast. The manhole. Izuku pointed to a rusted ladder leading up to the street level, 3 blocks away from the bank. They scrambled up the ladder, lungs burning, muscles screaming. As Izuku closed the heavy iron manhole cover, he saw a silhouette burst through the steam below. All Might looked up. For a split second, their eyes met. The piercing blue eyes of the symbol of peace bore into the red mask of the king. Then, Izuku slammed the cover shut and sealed it with a thick layer of reinforced ice. They collapsed in the alleyway above, gasping for air. The sounds of sirens were distant. That. Syra wheezed, clutching her chest. Her hands were shaking. That was not a human. That was a natural disaster. His level was hidden to me, Izuku whispered, staring at his hands. We are ants to him. We got away, Bahadur noted, checking the single bag of money Alice had managed to retrieve before being thrown. And we got paid. Not bad for a first gig, huh? Izuku looked at the bag. Then he looked at the sky, where news helicopters were already circling the bank. We debuted, Izuku said, a mixture of fear and exhilaration rising in his chest. The world knows the Black Cross now. Aizawa returned to the principal's office, dropping onto the sofa with a heavy sigh. He tossed a USB drive onto Nizu's desk. Nizu, the chimera principal of UA, picked it up with a paw. Rough afternoon, Eraserhead? You could say that, Aizawa grunted. 4 villains. Highly coordinated. They treated a bank robbery like a military operation. Nizu plugged the drive in. A video began to play bodycam footage from Aizawa's perspective. It showed the chaotic fight in the lobby, the pillars of ice, the hard light barriers, and the effortless strength of the Rook. Nizu watched intently, his black eyes glinting. Fascinating. No casualties? None. They herded the civilians. They were polite. And their quirks? Nizu asked. Hard to pin down, Aizawa admitted. The fire user. When I erased her quirk, the fire went out immediately. Same with the barrier user. But. He hesitated. Something felt off. Usually, when I erase a quirk, I feel a snapping sensation. A connection breaking. With them. It felt hollow. Like there was nothing to break. Curious, Nizu mused. And the leader? The king? He's the problem, Aizawa pointed to the screen where Izuku was summoning ice walls. He uses ice and lightning. Simultaneously. And with high output. The door to the office opened. A skeletal figure walked in, coughing into a handkerchief. It was Toshinori Yagi All Might in his true form. I saw him too, Toshinori rasped, sitting in a chair. The boy in the mask. He looked terrified when I arrived, but his reaction time was impeccable. So you think AFO is on the move again? Nizu asked, the temperature in the room dropping at the mention of the name. Yes, I believe that to be the case, Toshinori said grimly. Normally, it isn't uncommon for quirks to possess multiple elements since people like Shoto Todoroki exist. Nizu nodded in agreement. However, Toshinori continued, pointing a bony finger at the screen. His quirk is split into halves that he can use. Both exist as one. But for King, that's a different story. He can use both ice and lightning without any restrictions, as seen in the video. For example, Kenzo Midoriya, the son of the late hero Hisashi, can create and control both lightning and ice, but his limits are strict. One element on his right, the other on his left. Daiki Midoriya only has lightning. Yuki Midoriya only has ice. You suspect a connection to the Midoriya family? Nizu asked. Or someone who stole their quirks, Toshinori said darkly. Or mimicked them. Nizu nodded slowly. While there are some holes in your argument, I can't deny the possibility that All for One is involved in this. If he is cultivating a new group, we need to be careful. I will look into it, Toshinori promised. But my time limit. You have limited time per day now, Nizu interrupted gently. It is dangerous to go to a place where AFO might be when you're low on stamina already. I will call on some people from the Safety Commission to focus primarily on Black Cross. Why can't I? Because we need you for the future, Nizu said. All right, Nizu. I'll leave this in your hands for now. But if AFO is found, be sure that you call on me first. Toshinori stood up, his form briefly flickering with muscle before settling back into his skeletal state. He left the room, shutting the door softly behind him. Nizu waited a moment, then pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he stopped on a name simply listed as President. He dialed. After a short second of ringing, the phone picked up. Hello there, Nizu, a smooth, female voice answered. I thought you wouldn't call me unless for emergencies. Well, I think you can consider this cause for slight concern, Nizu said, his tone cheerful but his eyes cold. I sent you a file. Download it and watch. There was silence on the line for a few minutes as the data transferred. So you want us to do what? The president asked finally. Stop them? Track down AFO? After all, it is our goal. Precisely. The voice sighed. Fine then. I guess it's about time I repay you for your help. Yes. Now then, good night, Madam President. Have a good night, Principal Nizu. The dark room. In a room darker than the deepest dungeon, a projector played the news footage on a loop. Blurry footage of the king summoning lightning. Clear footage of the Rook tearing off a vault door. A group of men sat around a long table, their faces obscured by shadow. The only light came from the projector screen, casting flickering blue light on their suits. So they want us to stop them? One man asked, sounding bored. Isn't that a little underwhelming? Well, according to the president, this group might be connected to All for One, another replied. Of course, while that is interesting, I have some more troubling news to share. All the men in the room turned towards the figure at the head of the table. He was an older man, his presence demanding absolute obedience. They called him Father. Well, then, Lucas, Father said, gesturing to the young man sitting to his right. Tell them what you told me. A young man with blonde hair wearing a pristine white hoodie and black techwear pants slowly walked forward from the shadows. He moved with a lazy, arrogant grace. "Yes, father," Lucas said, looking at the screen where Izuku was fighting Aizawa. "I believe that this person who is the king of this group is just like me, possessing the power of infinite growth." All the men immediately flew into screaming chatter. Infinite growth? Impossible. Only Lucas has the system. No way, there is another. "Quiet," father shouted. The room went silent instantly. "I already made my decision on what to do. Lucas, tell them the verdict." Lucas took a deep breath, a smirk playing on his lips. "Recruit the king. And if he refuses? Kill him." The men went back to chatting to themselves, nodding. They agreed that this plan was rather simple, but it was effective. "And you believe that you can kill him?" one man asked skeptically. Lucas laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "I can kill him with a single flick of my finger." He looked at Izuku on the screen. He saw the way Izuku moved, the way he hesitated. He saw a player who was still figuring out the controls. Entity, king, target, status, inferior. Lucas had been given his system by the Grim Reaper years ago. He had chosen the path of the hero of light, maximizing his stats, unlocking skills that burned with holy fire. He was level. Well, he stopped counting after father cleared his throat, gaining everyone's attention. "Even then, we will provide you with a team of prodigies from around the world to assist you. Use them however you like." "I will use them to the best of my abilities and your interest," Lucas said, bowing slightly. "Good, you are excused." "Thank you, father." Lucas left the room, his white hoodie disappearing into the dark hallway. Shortly after, a figure leaned toward father. "I wish my kid was as good as yours." Father sighed, rubbing his temples. "You don't wish that thing was your kid, trust me." "Is there something wrong with that?" "Lucas has found a new toy to play with," father explained, his voice grim. "So much so that he gives it its own room. And spends all his time with it. And even feeds it, much to the toy's dismay." "A toy?" "A human girl," father clarified. "I believe she was his senior from middle school." The other men's faces became grim. "I installed a camera in that room to see exactly what he was up to," father continued. "But all he does is sit in the chair next to the bed where the girl lies. When she wakes up, he waits to see how she reacts to him. If she starts panicking, crying, or screaming, he injects her with a quirk-stopping drag. That side effect is extreme drowsiness. So the girl just ends up going right back to sleep. This has been going on for months. And why haven't you stopped him?" "Simple, I can't." "You can't?" "I've thought about ways to try and convince him to stop, but they would all end with him killing me, so I never tried," father admitted, a rare flicker of fear in his eyes. "But now I have at least a way that the girl can be saved." Father put down a small stack of paper on the table. It showed a person's name, Quirk, as well as a picture of a girl with white hair and sharp eyes. "You see this girl here?" He lifted the paper. "This person is a young prodigy from France chosen to assist in this mission. Her name is Elise Caesar. And she is also the kidnapped girl's younger sister." The other men were in shock. This plan might work. Since if the girl succeeded in saving her sister and if Lucas does find out, they can say that they didn't know the connection. "Well, good luck with your plan. I do hope it works out." The others nodded in agreement. Father looked down at Elise's paper once more. "I hope so too. CI Academy. Due to last night's bank heist by the villain group Black Cross, the Kyoshi Ward Central Bank has released a statement." The television in the student lounge clicked off. Psycho Intelli lowered the remote. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her posture rigid. She had periwinkle hair cut in a precise Heim style and eyes the color of a winter sky bluish lilac and currently devoid of warmth. Around her, the chatter of the other students resumed, louder and sharper than before. "Did you hear? The plaintiffs are asking for the estate," a girl whispered loudly near the vending machines. "Everything. The house, the cars, the stocks." "Serves her right," another replied, not bothering to lower her voice. "She walked around here like she owned the place. Now she's going to be on the street. I heard her parents were drunk. Killed those people in the other car." Psycho stood up. She smoothed down her uniform, a white, double-breasted blazer with gold trim that cost more than most of these students' tuition. She picked up her bag and walked out of the lounge. She didn't look at them. She didn't acknowledge them. "Lions do not concern themselves with the opinions of sheep," her father used to say. But as she walked down the pristine hallways of CI Academy, Psycho realized something her father hadn't taught her: when the lion is wounded, the sheep learn to bite. She left the school grounds, the heavy iron gates clanging shut behind her. She walked past the chauffeur-driven cars of her classmates. There was no car waiting for her today. The family driver had been let go yesterday. She walked home. It was a long walk. When she finally reached the Intelli estate, she paused at the front door. "I'm home," she said to the empty air. Silence answered her. The house was dark. Dust covers were draped over the furniture in the foyer, assets frozen by the court, ready to be liquidated. Psycho walked to the kitchen, poured herself a bowl of cereal, and sat at the long, empty dining table. She pulled a stack of legal documents from her bag. Plaintiff, the families of the victims. Evidence, toxicology report, Exhibit A. Witness testimony, Exhibit B. "It's fake," Psycho whispered, staring at the toxicology numbers. "The metabolic rate doesn't match the time of death. It's a forgery." She had told her lawyer. He had nodded, smiled, and done nothing. They bought him, she realized, a cold knot forming in her stomach. They bought the lawyer. They bought the judge. And I'm going to lose everything. She wasn't just losing money. She was losing her family's name. Her legacy. Psycho closed her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. She was a genius. Her IQ quirk allowed her to process information faster than a supercomputer. But logic couldn't fight corruption. Not when the game was rigged. 2 hours later, Psycho sat on a park bench, the legal documents spread out around her. The wind whipped at the papers, threatening to scatter her life across the grass. The time stamp on the security footage is off by 3 minutes. Psycho looked up. Standing over her was a boy. He looked to be about her age, maybe a year younger. He had white hair, green eyes that looked far too old for his face, and scars on his hands. He wore a simple hoodie, but he carried himself with a strange, quiet confidence. "Excuse me?" Psycho asked, her guard going up instantly. "Exhibit C," the boy said, pointing to a photo of the crash site. The shadows. Based on the angle of the sun, that photo was taken at 4 p.m. But the police report says the crash happened at 4:45 p.m. The shadows should be longer. Psycho looked at the photo. She calculated the azimuth of the sun. She adjusted for the season. Her eyes widened. "You're right. It's inconsistent. It proves the police arrived earlier than stated," the boy continued. "Which means the scene was tampered with before the official report was filed." Psycho looked at him. Really looked at him. "Who are you?" "Izuku," he said. He didn't offer a last name. He sat down on the other end of the bench, leaving a respectful distance. "I've been following your case. It's sloppy work, honestly. But effective against someone playing by the rules." "And you don't play by the rules?" Psycho asked. "I prefer to make my own," Izuku said. He turned to her, his expression serious. "You're going to lose tomorrow, Psycho. The judge has already drafted the verdict. I saw it on his private server." Psycho froze. "You hacked a federal judge?" "I have resources," Izuku shrugged. "The point is, logic won't save you. You need leverage. You need someone to reach into the mud and pull the plug on their drain. And that someone is you?" "That someone is my organization," Izuku corrected. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I can make this go away. I can expose the forgery, bankrupt the plaintiffs, and ensure the judge retires in disgrace. You keep your house. You keep your name. And the price?" Psycho asked, her mind racing. "I don't have money. Not anymore." "I don't want money," Izuku said. "I want your brain." He held up 3 fingers. 3 favors. "In the future, I will call on you 3 times. You will answer. You will use that high IQ of yours to solve problems for me. No questions asked." Psycho stared at his hand. It was a Faustian bargain. She knew it. He was clearly a criminal. Hacking judges? Dealing in blackmail? But she looked at the empty park. She thought of her silent house. She thought of the smug faces of her classmates. 3 favors, Psycho repeated. 3, Izuku confirmed. Psycho extended her hand. "Deal." Izuku shook it. His grip was firm, cold. "Pleasure doing business with you." The Black Cross hideout. "So let me get this straight," Bahadur said, tugging at the collar of his suit. "We are going to court?" "We are going to influence the court," Izuku corrected. He stood at the head of the table in the warehouse. The heist money had been put to good use. They had better equipment now, better surveillance. Bahadur looked ridiculous. The suit Izuku had bought him was an XL, but the former paladin's muscles strained against the fabric so hard the seams whispered in protest every time he moved. He looked less like a paralegal and more like a hitman who had lost a bet. "You are the intimidation," Izuku said to him. "You carry the boxes. You glare at the prosecution. You make them nervous." "I can glare," Bahadur agreed. "Do I get a sword?" "No sword. Just a briefcase." "Heavy briefcase," Bahadur negotiated. "Fine. Put a brick in it." Izuku turned to Syra and Alice. You two stay here on comms. Monitor the police channels. If things go sideways, you are the extraction team. Boring, Alice complained from the couch, where she was eating potato chips with chopsticks. I wanted to see the human justice system. I hear it is a farce. It is, Izuku muttered. That's why we're going to break it. He checked his inventory. He had the files. He had the blackmail. He had the evidence. But he had a bad feeling. His danger sense had been buzzing low in the back of his skull all morning. Let's go, Izuku said. Don't be late for court. District Court, Courtroom 4. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back benches, hungry for the fall of the Intelli dynasty. All rise, the bailiff announced. Judge Mary entered. She was an older woman with a severe face, but Izuku noticed the new diamond watch on her wrist instantly. Bribed. Psycho sat at the defense table. She looked pale but composed. Next to her sat her court-appointed lawyer, a man who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. And behind her, sitting in the first row of the gallery, was Bahadur. He wore sunglasses indoors and had a briefcase on his lap that looked heavy enough to crush a skull. He was staring unblinkingly at the plaintiff's attorney. The attorney was sweating. Are we ready to proceed? Judge Mary asked. Your Honor, a voice called out from the back. Before we begin, the state has assigned additional security due to the recent rise in organized villain activity. The doors opened. Two figures walked in. The gallery murmured. Flashbulbs went off. The first was a boy with blonde hair and a white techwear hoodie. He walked with a lazy, easy grace, waving to the press. He had a smile that could sell toothpaste, but his eyes were dead. The second was a girl. She had stark white hair and wore a matching white outfit, but unlike the boy, she wasn't smiling. She stood a step behind him, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She didn't look like a sidekick. She looked like a predator on a leash. Her eyes darted around the room, dissecting threats with a terrifying intensity. My name is Lucas, the boy announced, flashing a badge. And this is Elise. We represent Ethereal Genesis. We're here to ensure nothing interrupts justice. Izuku, sitting in the back corner with a press pass he had forged, felt his system ping violently. Warning, high-level entity detected. Entity, Lucas, hero of light, threat level, deadly. Lucas. Izuku narrowed his eyes beneath his cap. The one AFO warned about. Lucas took a position near the judge's bench. Elise stood by the door. She wasn't looking at the crowd. She was glaring at Lucas's back with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. Trouble in paradise? Izuku noted. The trial began. It was a massacre. The plaintiff's attorney, Damien, laid out the forged evidence. The toxicology report. The witness statements. Your Honor, Damien smiled. The evidence is clear. The Intelli family was negligent. Objection, Psycho stood up. She held a piece of paper Izuku had slipped into her folder earlier. The toxicology report references a metabolite that degrades within 2 hours. If the test was done 4 hours later as stated, this chemical shouldn't exist. The judge frowned. Miss Intelli, you are not a lawyer. I am a victim of fraud, Psycho stated coldly. And I have proof that the lab technician received a deposit of 2 million yen the day before this report was filed. She held up the bank statement. The courtroom exploded into whispers. Damien turned pale. He looked at the judge. The judge looked at Lucas. Lucas didn't look worried. He checked his watch. Crash. The double doors at the back of the courtroom exploded inward. Debris rained down on the press gallery. Nobody move. A man stepped through the dust. He wore a suit made of red leather and had a helmet with a single, glowing red eye. He held a serrated blade made of crystallized blood. Bloody eye, a reporter screamed. It's the serial killer. I am here to deliver a verdict. Bloody eye roared. He locked eyes on Psycho. Death to the defendant. He charged. The crowd panicked. People scrambled over benches. Psycho froze. She watched the killer rush toward her. Bahadur stood up, ready to intercept, but Izuku signaled him to wait. Not yet. Don't blow the cover. Bloody Eye leaped over the railing, raising his blade to strike Psycho. Not on my watch, a smooth voice said. Lucas moved. He stepped between Psycho and the killer. He raised one hand. A barrier of pure white light erupted from his palm. Clang. The blood blade shattered against the light. Evil cannot stand before the light, Lucas declared, posing perfectly for the cameras. Bloody Eye swung again. Lucas dodged effortlessly, weaving through the attacks like a dancer. Elise. Contain him. Lucas ordered. Elise moved. She didn't use light. She moved with raw speed. She appeared behind Bloody Eye and kicked him in the back of the knee. It was a brutal, efficient strike that shattered the joint. Bloody Eye screamed, falling to the floor. Elise grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back, slamming his face into the carpet. She held him there, breathing hard. But she wasn't looking at the villain she had captured. She was looking up at Lucas. Her expression wasn't one of triumph. It was disgust. "Take him away," Lucas commanded the bailiffs. "Justice is served." The courtroom erupted into applause. Ethereal Genesis. Ethereal Genesis. Psycho watched the scene unfolding. Her IQ quirk was firing on all cylinders, processing the micro-expressions, the timing, the physics. The villain swung wide. He telegraphed his attack. He aimed for my shoulder, not my neck. Lucas's barrier appeared before the strike connected. And the girl. She pinned him, but she looked like she wanted to snap Lucas's neck, not the villain's. It was a play. A staged performance to make Lucas look like a savior and force a mistrial in the chaos. But the plan had failed. Bloody Eye was captured. The evidence Psycho presented was still on the record. "Order." Judge Mary banged her gavel, looking terrified. "Order in the court." The verdict. 2 hours later, Psycho walked out of the courthouse. The judge, terrified of the scrutiny after the attack and the exposed bank statement, had declared a mistrial with prejudice. The case was dismissed. The plaintiffs were under investigation for fraud. She had won. She walked to the alleyway behind the court where she had agreed to meet her benefactor. Izuku was leaning against a brick wall, his hood up. Bahadur was next to him, finally taking off the tight suit jacket with a sigh of relief. "You won," Izuku said. "I did," Psycho replied. She didn't smile. "Did our services meet your expectations?" "You forged the bank statement," Psycho noted. "The lab tech never got paid. You just made it look like he did." Fighting fire with fire, Izuku shrugged. "So, about those favors." "I'm joining you," Psycho said abruptly. Izuku blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'm joining the Black Cross." Psycho crossed her arms. "I watched that hero today. Lucas. He staged the attack. He hired the villain to kill me or pretend to boost his ratings and disrupt the trial." She looked at Izuku. "He lied to the world. He played with my life. You are a criminal. You blackmail judges. You forge evidence. But you were honest with me. You told me the price, and you delivered the product." She stepped forward. "I have no money. I have no family. All I have is this brain. If the world is run by liars like Lucas, I'd rather work for honest villains." Izuku stared at her. He grinned. He reached into his inventory and pulled out the white cloak he had saved. "Welcome to the team, Queen." Psycho took the cloak. "About time." "One thing," Psycho added, looking back toward the courthouse. "That girl. Elise. The partner?" "She's not his partner," Psycho said, her eyes narrowing. "When she pinned the villain, she whispered something to him. She asked him, 'Where is she?' She isn't working with Lucas. She's hunting him." Izuku frowned. "Interesting." The back alley. A mile away, in a darker, grimy alley, a transaction was taking place. Lucas tossed a thick envelope of cash onto the wet pavement. Bloody Eye, nursing a broken leg and a dislocated shoulder, picked it up with his good hand. "Pleasure doin' business with ya," Bloody Eye grunted, limping away into the shadows. "Next time, tell your girl to ease up on the knee. She fights dirty." "She's spirited," Lucas smiled, turning around. Elise stood at the mouth of the alley. Her white outfit was spotless, but her aura was black with rage. "You hired him," Elise stated. "It wasn't a question." "I hired a stress test for the court security," Lucas corrected smoothly. "It's not my fault the target was the defendant." "You are evil, Lucas," Elise said, her hands trembling. "I am efficient," Lucas shrugged. "We got the press. We got the fame. Ethereal Genesis is trending." Elise stepped forward, invading his personal space. She was shorter than him, but in that moment, she looked ready to tear his throat out with her teeth. "You kidnapped my sister," she hissed. "I know you did. Sarah disappeared the day you unlocked your quirk." Lucas's smile didn't waver. He leaned down, whispering in her ear. "I've told you time and time again, Elise. I don't know where your sister is. But if you stick around, maybe we'll find her together? After all, the world is a dangerous place. You need a hero to protect you." He pulled back, patting her on the head condescendingly. "Now let's go. We have a villain group to hunt. The Black Cross isn't going to catch itself." Lucas walked past her, whistling a cheerful tune. Elise stood in the alley for a long moment. She stared at the envelope of cash Bloody Eye had left behind. "TCH, she spat, her eyes burning with a cold, blue flame. "DMNBSTRD. She turned and followed him. Not because she believed him, but because he was the only lead she had.
Okay, sadly the chapter is over, and if you enjoyed the video just leave a like, and subscribe with post notification. so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.